summarizes, the whole concept of a checklist. That's really what it's about, It summarizes, these are the items that you need to think about when you're going to learn halacha. Okay? You didn't keep our Mishnah. The Mishnah is out of there. The 6 things of the Mishnah. The 6 items of a Mishnah. Okay, no. Okay. You could do that next time. Mishnah. Yeah, the 6 items. So, but this is all the ideas that emerge from halacha. It's amazing, when you go through that, you can really know halacha very well. Obviously, there's an enormous amount of information there. So I would suggest to look it over and really remember it. This stuff has to be automatic. As soon as you look at halacha, there you are. Case, conduct, principle, essential conditions, derivation, and variations of conditions. It has to be automatic. Look, in the end, everything depends on to what level you want to know Torah. It's really what it's about. Some guys would say, hey, what do I need all this stuff for? What's the point? What do I need it? You need to see it, you go out and have it. It's a good time. But if a person wants to really clean that Torah, once he wants to know it at a real level of depth, this is the way to go. So a commitment is up to the person. Remember what I told you once? They asked for how do you remember everything? And he answered, because I want to. Well, what he was simply saying is, that's my commitment. I want to know. Most people don't want to know, they just want to learn. But they don't really care to know. Wanting to know is a different level than just wanting to learn. You see. And wanting to know is an inferior level to wanting to master. That's the difference. Then I got to know something, okay. I learned it and I know it, but have I mastered it? Do I have a command over the topic? That's a whole different level. That requires a real commitment and dedication, These things just don't happen unless a person really is involved, And each person has to decide to what level do they want to master Torah, The only thing you could say is, I want to master Torah, but I don't know how. There you are, that's how. That's the how to do it. Those are the objects, those are the items of information that you have to really walk away knowing. Certainly a Mishnah. And a Mishnah is not just for your side. A Mishnah is the fundamental text for a database. Without a database, forget it. You'll burn out because you'll never know anything. You'll burn out, you'll forget because you have no database, you have no framework in which to put all the information in. I've said that many times. Hopefully everybody agrees. Okay, any questions about what I just said? Or?
Yeah, just about the general application of the system which we'll be looking at. But how does the system actually confront the following issue? That the Mishnah isn't necessarily... the Mishnah has an agenda of its own.
Yes.
It's not necessarily presenting it systematically the same way as...
Yeah.
For example,
yeah.
Say a random example, we say the second character of Eva Mitzias. It starts off with giving some situations that only apply in very, very limited circumstances. Eva Mitzias, Shein Shelo.
Yes.
And then, but the main point of Hashava Saveda, you've got to get a fair distance in the perek before you actually come to grips with the psukim and the general principle of Hashava Saveda. This diagram deals with the general principle first, and then it starts going to the protim. So that if you took Eva Mitzias and structured it this way, or say you took a better example would be Ezer Neshech. Right? Ezer Neshech starts with some, doesn't really get into it until you're a good way into it, until you're really into it.
Yes.
You would the final product of Ezer Neshech translated into this diagram would be in a completely different order.
You say Eva Mitzias or Ezer Neshech?
Both.
Oh yeah.
Would be in a completely different order.
That is why.
To the way that the Mishnah presents it.
Yes, that's why I think I once said that the real way to understand learning really is not via the Mishnah. The Mishnah is not a textbook, really. It's not a textbook that is an educational textbook. That's out. What the Mishnah fundamentally is, I think, is a record of the oral law in its most general form. But that's not a textbook is a completely, it's written differently. A textbook begins from a beginning, and it gives you sufficient and adequate information, what I call the PI, preliminary ideas, and it builds. And each chapter gets more and more detailed, and therefore more and more advanced. That's what a textbook does, because a textbook is concerned about what? About education, and that's what it does. The Mishnah, not only is it out of sequence, enormous amount of information is not even there. That's why Mishnah is so difficult to learn. So then the question is, wait a minute, if a tremendous amount of information is missing, right, and it's all out of sequence, so what is Rabbi really doing? And probably the answer is, he wants to keep a record of the oral law, Torah Shabbat, and for whatever. Yeah, you have to also remember one thing, they had a tremendous disadvantage 2,000 years ago. You know what that was? What was it?
No printing.
No printing. You write something down, that took you weeks and weeks to write out something. And then, you needed parchment. Did they have paper? I think the Chinese invented paper. But you needed ink and paper and write it out legibly. And then how do you reproduce it? No copy machines. No printing. How do you what?
Sit there and reproduce all the
Yeah, monks, exactly. But who wants to be a monk? It's hard enough to be a monkey, to be a monk. Anyway, but and that's why they were very limited. That's the main reason why Rav Ashi wrote the Gemara the way he did. The Gemara is a legal text that deals with problems of the oral law. Now, Rav Ashi could not write a full composition because it'd be 12,000 pages. That's what it would look like. You know what a 12,000 page, book is like? We are only 2 shasts in existence. How long it takes to write out. So what he did, basically, he wrote a notebook. That's what he did, and that's why Gemara is so difficult. Of course, the problem of writing a notebook leads to another difficulty, or really problem, and that is that, what is he really talking about? So that leads to an enormous amount of various opinions as to what he said. And they write it as a notebook, because they didn't have printing either. So what do we have? We have text, we have, notebook form, commentaries trying to figure out what the Gemara is saying in notebook form, and then commentaries, super commentaries on them in notebook form. So in the end, you have, on any one Gemara, you could have, with 300 pages, mostly, and they're all written like a notebook. That's what happened to learning. But it's interesting, had printing been done, I think, had printing been discovered 3,000 years ago, Rashi could have wrote a full composition with all the unstated thoughts in between the lines of Gemara written, and all the preliminary information, whatever. Wow, what a difference that would have made. Then you could probably remove or erase 90% of anything that was ever written, because most of it is speculation on what the Gemara is saying. The amount of arguments the fact that there was no printing, the amount of arguments that were generated, and sveikas or doubts as to what is being said, is beyond belief. You take a look at what's out there, there's machlokas here, and so on, and varies, he says, this is really what it meant, he said that meant, then there's commentaries, what did Tosfos really mean, and then the Mashal, what did Mashal really mean? Because everybody's writing a notebook, same exact style, no printing, no copy machines, and that's, my feeling is that's really why there is. Of course, what it does generate is an enormous amount of thinking in Torah. There's one, let's say there's one right answer, and then there's 30 wrong answers. Those 30 wrong answers generate an incredible amount of material that you could think about and sort of like refine, and so on. So that was good. But for the average learner, it's formidable.
So somebody has to come up with an idea to write it as a textbook.
Correct. And that's what Siyata Dishma, I think, is trying to do, is a textbook. But here's the problem with all the textbooks. And that's what you'll bring up. Yaakov, right? Yes. Here's the problem. Okay. The Mishnah not only does it missing of Velter stuff, It's out of sequence. The sequence is not the right, is incorrect, really, you know. Like in many sectors that way, you see. And even if it was in sequence, is that the way to present the material? The real way to present material is what? What is the greatest form of material presentation? That a person can master what he sees.
Thinking.
You know what is what?
Because thinking.
No, thinking is the activity. What's the form?
The form is going from basic to complex.
Yeah, what's
Yeah.
that? What? No, that's a sequence.
Right?
No, but if I want to present to you, you know, the greatest form of mastering material, how would I present it? I would present it as a structure. A structure. What is a structure? I want to mention, what is a structure? A structure is an arrangement of categories, right? And what is the relationship between the categories? Relationship. That's what a structure is. It will show you exactly everything's position correctly and how they're related to each other. And the position is determined by its relationship, you see. And when you have a structure like that, then it's incredible. You see every idea, every category, every idea in its category, and the relationship between all categories to each other. You see, and you look at that, that is the ideal and the greatest way of presenting information.
But how
So
do you-
what the objective is to take all the Mishnaic ideas, statements, and all the preliminary ideas which Rabbi left out, right? And all the post-commentaries ideas, what I call the supplemental information, right? And take that and put it into one massive structure where everything is clearly related. And you look at that, it's astounding. So really you have two concepts. You have the Mishnah itself, the Mishnah format, the halachas in a Mishnah format, and you have the halachas in a structured format. And then you link the Mishnah to the structure. In other words, this halacha, let's say Perek Gimel, you know, Mishnah Aleph, where's that halacha in the structure? And then you go back to the structure, and here it is, you see. So the way it has to be in your mind is structure. And then you link all the Mishnahs, all the halachas of each Mishnah into that structure. And you will have mastered the area.
So Tarek mitzvahs will go into that structure? Or
Yes.
Is that over?
Well, the Tayyab mitzvahs chronologically won't, but according to the Rambam, it will. The Rambam say them, according to topics. That's how you learn Tayyab mitzvahs. You learn it that way, based on the Rambam's order, because he orders it based on topics and so on. You know, all the mitzvahs that have to do with Pesach, right? All the mitzvahs that have to do with, you know, whatever, Kabbanis. That's how you learn the mitzvahs. You know.
I'm just trying to think how that might be represented diagrammatically.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Could I make a
incredible.
suggestion? Say you could use your typical type of hierarchies level diagram. That you've got the main concept is one big circle.
Yes.
Then that breaks down into 4 more categories. That's
Yes.
level 2. Then each one breaks down into 6 more categories. That's
Exactly.
level 3. And then at the same time, you could use a color coding. If it's a Mishnah,
Yeah.
you'd use one color. If it's Gemara first generation, like Rav and Shmuel,
Yeah.
you'd use another one.
Yeah.
If it's a Bar and Robber, you'd use the third color. If it's Ravina and Ravashi, you'd use a 4th color because of the different levels of the Gemara.
Exactly. Oh yeah, exactly, sure. So you could take a diagram and literally have all the information of a total area in one diagram. Then what you could do is have sub-diagrams, you know. You know, okay, I want to learn about this area, so you click into the box, and there it is, there's a sub-diagram. Then you can click into that box, and so on.
Like a
But-
cutout on the map.
yeah, exactly. And the beauty of that is you never get lost. The key is not to get lost in the information. That's what everybody does. They get lost.
Can I give a suggestion? I
Sure.
find that if you learn the Shulchan Aruch, like the Rav Shulchan Aruch, let's say on Sukkot, on Pesach, whatever it is,
Yeah.
you learn that first, and then you learn the Masechta, things are much easier.
Yeah, why?
Because when you learn the Shulchan Aruch, you get the good idea, especially the Rav Shulchan Aruch, you get a very good idea what everything is about, a good idea. And
Why
then
do you get a good idea?
Why? Because it's structured.
No.
I don't know why, but that's I find it to be a very good way to go.
I agree with you, but that's not why. The reason why it's a great idea is because the Shulchan Aruch are facts. The Gemara is debate.
Okay.
That's why.
So you get the facts, you get the ideas.
You get the facts first, and then you worry about the Gemara later.
And then when the Gemara comes, you feel at home.
Yeah, because you have the facts.
So I'm just saying, it's a suggestion of people.
Well, of course, yeah. But what they do is, like I once said, they learn the Gemara and they have a maskon in the Gemara, right? So it's a maskon, it's part of the debate, and then you go on. Wrong. What they should do is look at that maskona and go to the Shulchan Aruch, and then the maskona becomes a fact, a yediyah, a piece of information that you remember, right? And but they don't do that. They just learn the Gemara on and on and on, as if the maskona itself is nothing more than part of the Shakrataya. That's why most people don't remember anything, you know. But if you would do that, you know, if you would take the maskona of a Gemara, at least, and go back to the Shulchan Aruch, or the Torah, even the Torah, you know, and so on, you'd be way ahead of the game. That's what, by the way, that's what I think what Rabbi Yashiv did. All Gedolim do that. They don't stay on the Gemara. They go to the Shulchan Aruch and say, okay, you know what, and Rabbi Yashiv, I think, if I read, you know, he used to say, okay, this halacha, he goes to the Shulchan Aruch, and then he says, okay, what kind of a case could have illustrated this psak? Yeah, he thinks of a case.
That's synthesis, you know.
Yeah, exactly. Well, what he's doing, he's connecting. You know, he's looking at an abstract halacha, and he's looking at it. Okay, practically speaking, how would it manifest in a real situation? So after a while, you go to Shas, you know, 100,000 situations. That's why he was able to, you know.
And somebody comes in with a case, and it's like, okay.
Right there, you know, they say within 10 minutes or something like that, there was a whole line of guys asking. He answered 75 questions in 10 minutes. How do you do that? The answer is because he already knew the 75 cases. You know, so he just said, "Oh God, that 1, 2, 3, 4." You know, he already knew it. That's the whole beauty of it. You know, look, the godless of Rabbi Yashiv. That's his godless, which is it's actually in terms of inhuman. His ability to focus for 18 hours a day is beyond belief. That you have to stand up to the man and say, that is incredible. You know, most guys cannot focus more than 12 minutes. You know, the attention span of most people is about 12 minutes.
12? I thought it was 4.
And
they've actually reduced it now to 3.4, 3 3/4.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Which is unbelievable. You know, that's why so many people don't remember what they learned. They can't even focus and so on. You know. So the fact that he was able to focus for, you know, he got up at 2 a.m. every morning, and he went to sleep at 9 or 10. It's inhuman, and not that it's, but it's abnormal. People don't do that anymore. But so that I have to give a yashikoch to Rav Yashiv. That's incredible. But his manner of learning, anybody could do. He would learn Gemara, and then he would apply it. Anybody could do that. But if you combine the two, then you get a Rav Yashiv. That's the difference. But the truth is, his manner of learning, what was the big deal? Any person does that. You know? It's only in yeshiva basically they don't do that. They learn Gemara, and that's the end of it. That's a tremendous mistake. But in any case, but they develop a database from the Gemara itself. The real way to develop a database is not from the Gemara, because you don't want to develop a database from problems and debates and arguments. That's not how you do it. You know, what you do is you learn Mishnayos and you fill in all the missing information. So for that you have the Mefoshim. Thank God that saved us. You know, or else you'd be stuck. I mean, what did they do before the Rav? I have no idea what they did before the Rav. You know, Bataner. Who knows what they did? And he's really the first real commentary. Then you had Tracy Shant from the first and so on. You know, but who knows what they did before?
What year was that?
Which? Who?
The Rab.
I think 1620 or 1640. 16, or maybe even earlier, maybe 15. And then the Tracy Shant was in 16. Oh, by the way, today I think is the Yotza. Yesterday was the Yotza and the Tracy Shant. But and anyway, so the ideal way to master Torah is to have the structure of all information and then the linkage of all Mishnahs to that structure. And if you do that, there are very few people that can hold a candle to you. Very few people.
I'm surprised you haven't mentioned that Rav Kessin hadn't mentioned the Beis Yosef, which brings the link between
Yeah.
the Gemara, the Shulchan Aruch.
Well, the basis of commentary or the basis of Shulchan Aruch?
No, the commentary on the Torah.
On the Torah, yeah, oh yeah, well, that was revolutionary. Yeah. That
Because one thing I was taught in my teens,
well, I
I'm very
think
fortunate to have a
you
Rebbe.
learned the Torah.
I was very fortunate to have a Eliezer, I think he's known to you as well, Rabbi Nezikin, when he actually taught us how to learn.
Who was this? Rabbi Nezikin?
Yeah.
He lives in Lakewood.
He was in Lakewood,
Yeah.
yeah. But in those days, he was a very, very young. I was one of his first Talmidim.
Wow.
He
Okay.
was in his
I know him.
mid-twenties.
I know Rabbi Nezikin.
You will appreciate where they're coming from.
What's his first name again?
Melee.
Mayor Levin listens. He lives in Lakewood, yes.
His method of teaching was that he'd take a sugya, and we
Yeah.
were in my mid-teens, and he'd actually take the main yonim and then take you through the Torah and then the Beis Yosef,
Yeah.
and then show you how and make the link between what's in the Gemara and what's in Halacha.
Exactly, of
And
course.
that made a very big impact on me in
Yeah.
my youth.
Oh yeah, sure. That's why really, in a certain sense, I remember when I learned Yodea, for speak or whatever, you know. So there was the Gemara, but then I would learn the Torah with the Beis Yosef and the Darkei Moshe. Because the Beis Yosef, the Shulchan Aruch Beis Yosef is really a bridge version of the commentary. That's really what it is. And the Darkei Moshe is the Ramah. And the Ramah is a bridge version of that. You learn just that, and you have such an incredible insight in the halacha, because the Beis Yosef brings down Rishonim, a lot of Rishonim and so on. So it's really tremendous. Anyway, that's the way to do it. But again, it's all commitment. That's what you want to do. Yeah.
But in a practical way,
Yeah.
right? You still, what's the best educational way to do it? In other words, is that you're not going to look at a map to learn, right? You're going to form ideas and then create a map, right? It's not a matter of,
Yes.
because if a structure were the best way to learn and the most efficient way to learn, then instead of having books, we would just have diagrams, and we would maybe even computer programs that would click on all sorts of levels.
Yeah, that's really all you need. Yeah.
You can really learn that way?
Of course. But you have to have notes explaining the diagram. Because the diagram is only diagram, it's just like, one word here, one word there.
Right.
No, but if you had a diagram, what's called a grand structure, right? And you had an accompanying manual that explained every aspect of the diagram, right? Theoretically, you'd have, it's incredible. That's the way to go.
Which is much easier to do today with
Oh, yeah,
computing
yeah,
than it
sure.
would have been,
Yeah, oh, yeah.
10 years ago,
Yeah.
20 years
Yeah.
ago.
It's like laying out a city, putting a grid.
Yeah, exactly. That's what they should do.
You click on it.
Really, they should, have the 63 diagrams, so to speak, right? And notes accompany that, and they should teach the diagram with the notes and so on. And then, if you do that, you can run through Mishna. It's incredible. You can run easily, a 2 program a day with that, because you will know everything before you get to the Mishnah, including the ideas that are missing. You can master all Mishnayos in 2 years. You can know over 120,000.
Between 70,000 and 120.
You want your finger on 60 less.
You can know 100,000 halachas in 2 years with mastery. Why? Because in your mind you'll always see a diagram. That's the beauty. Visual learning is the greatest way to learn. A visual representation of information is the greatest way to learn and to remember.
And it's also probably the least common way to do it.
Yeah.
So there's nothing, right now,
Fascinating.
as we speak, there's nothing out there that covers what you're talking about.
Nothing.
Mind-boggling.
What?
Right. There have been. I always get a kick out of these mishnayos where they have pictures. As if that's the way to do it. They have no. There are places that do diagram. So you have one new level of learning is pictures. Like visual, like to show a little kid on a stove cooking. Wow. Now I know. Now I know what the halach is, right? This is childish. I mean, I'm not saying it's bad. Don't get me wrong. But really, that's not what's missing. Yeah, well, that's very good because the halacha refers to what's Masech Erev and those diagrams. It's about the case. What exactly is the case that we're talking about? But and then you have people who try to structure. But the problem is, most people do not know how to structure correctly. Look, there are many types of structures, but there's what's called a relationship structure that is consistently relationship. That's the greatest of all structures. You know, it's like looking at a map of Jerusalem. Everything is there in its proper position and orientation. So on. Most people do not have the ability to do that. And I've seen structures, and I had no concept of what the structure should be. Or it's wrong, because the fundamental ideas are not placed in their relationships. So all of a sudden it becomes confusing. Anyway, but yeah. Oh yeah. You could revolutionize Jewish education by having 63 true structural diagrams of the entire Masechta and so on, and you could teach that in a year or two, and that kid would know more than it would take 40 years. He'll know more in those 2 years than he will know in 40 years of learning Gemara. Because it's all Yedias, beautifully structured, period. Now when he learns Gemara, he sees exactly where that fits in his structure. And he has a roadmap.
Why 63?
Because there's 63 Masechtas.
Can I make a suggestion as to how that could be
Anyway.
carried out?
How that could be carried out?
How that could be carried out practically. You really need two sets of diagrams. Firstly, for each Masechta, you would need a sort of schematic diagram showing the system, where each idea is structured so that you can see how they relate to other ideas, and possibly using the color coding to show its origins. And then the second thing is Mishnah by Mishnah. That would be a supplement, right? Mishnah by Mishnah, you would have a table, right, for each Mishnah, which would actually follow Reb Tzvi's categories, where you've got the columns: case, conduct, principle, essential. And what would happen is they'd all be filled out.
Yeah. Exactly.
They'd all be filled out, and that would go together with the diagram.
Yes.
So that for each Masechta you've got A, a schematic diagram, and B, Mishnah by Mishnah.
With those details.
With those details.
Exactly.
So that the whole thing fits in, because at a glance you can see where they all belong.
Yeah.
And also you've got a guide Mishnah by Mishnah.
Yeah, that would revolutionize
Tremendous.
education. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
If you took each halach in each Mishnah, and you would according to that
That's it.
fill-ins, you know, would be beyond
Just
belief.
use the table with the headings.
Yeah. So why hasn't that been thought about? Why? Where is everybody today? Well, where are the educators today?
The thing is,
They don't even dream of this,
the problem
let
is,
alone do it.
Rabbi, the problem is,
What?
Previous generations also. Why wasn't it thought about?
No.
no,
No.
the problem is, medium is the message. People have not understood.
No, well, meaning that's just how to get it out there.
No,
I'm just about how to restructure the whole thing.
no, because people do not understand how the mind works. They haven't.
Yeah, okay, yeah, well,
In other words, in 1990 was a decade of brain research. Out of that came the next 40 years of understanding how the brain organizes information.
yeah, okay, that's the brain is nothing more.
No,
than
but
a
that's where you
mechanism.
have to start. I mean, unless you start
Yeah,
from
okay.
that.
That's fine.
I think a lot of
Anyway.
the Jewish world is stuck still on Torah. A lot more commentaries on Torah being written. You don't see much on Mishna and Gemara.
Well,
Except for Stein.
for many people for today, to learn Mishnah is embarrassing.
I
These
think
are
it's,
about us.
I think it's a matter
What
of
do you do
inertia.
learning Mishnah? It's embarrassing. Unless you learn it from
Inertia,
the
yeah.
outside. Then it's not
Everyone
embarrassing.
wants to do what they
But if
do.
a guy goes into yeshiva and sits down with a seder and opens up a Mishnayos and that's what he's learning, they're looking like he's crazy. What are you doing here? You know, they don't even understand what a Mishnah really does. You know, let alone allow it to happen in their base method. It's tragic. You're looking at this is tragic. That's like I say, that accounts for enormous amount of failure that is out there, and there's failure that we cannot even imagine. That guys who go to yeshiva for years and just don't get it. They don't really know what's going on. They barely can understand the Gemara, and then they turn off and they become at risk and all that kind of stuff.
I have a
Yeah,
sefer
anyway.
at home which deals with a similar problem, which is one part of Tanakh that I could never master, were the last 9 chapters of Yechezkel.
You mean about the base of English?
Yeah. You read it, it is absolutely incomprehensible. Yet Rav Sternbuch's book, which takes the whole thing systematically, with illustrations,
Yeah.
structures the whole thing completely differently to the order that's presented in your
Yeah, of course.
You read through that Sefer first,
Yeah.
work it through, have the diagrams
Then you go
line,
back.
and then you start going through the
Same
last
time,
9
same
chapters
idea.
of Yechezkel.
Well, the same
And then it
idea.
makes sense.
What's the name of the book? What's the name of the book?
It's called by Shlishi.
By who?
I believe it's by Rav Sternbuch.
Shlishi means Shani.
No,
No,
Shlishi.
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 Yechezkel talks
It's
about
the last 9 chapters.
Yeah, okay. Well, whatever, but it's the same idea. The greatest way to understand and to master is you need to see the structure, which is the relationship between all the fragments together. Period. That's called the big picture. You need to learn globally first. Then you begin to look at the details within that. And then you never get lost and you understand. And that's the greatest way to learn. And the way Torah is taught today is the reverse. It's all bits and pieces, and you never really get what's going on, and so on. It's the reverse of really the way it is. It's a tremendous, tragic mistake.
Maybe an introduction to a Masechta or to a Peri should be done. Written introduction explaining what's coming along and
Yeah,
things
but the introduction would be that structure. Anyway, okay, we are now we learned the first Mishna in Brachos. We are now on the second Mishna. Right? So who's going to say? By the way, for next time, do you want to continue with Brachos? Or do you want to see some of what? Would you want to switch to some other Mishnahs and some other...
In the winter, when you come back next time?
No,
Next time.
I'm talking about next week.
Next meeting.
Interesting question.
What? Want to continue?
Yeah. I mean,
Would
we're
it
here.
be a different spin if we chose a different Masechta that we would kind of like have a different, same method, but a different way of...
It would be a different topic, that's true. Yeah.
Why
It has its look, there's only today and 2 more times, and then I'm out of here.
What does the Rav think that we need the most
Right,
practice?
what do you think?
I would say that since there's only 2 more times left, maybe a variety would be a better way to go. It's the same method, but just more variety. Let's see how we apply it. Let's say first mission Bava Kama. Everybody learn Bava Kama? Yeah. One time in the reincarnation or something like that. Or you have to go back to get the... You want to do, let's say, the first mission Bava Kama? What would you like to do?
That's fine.
What?
Whatever the Rav.
Good.
Yes?
Yes.
Okay, next week, first mission Bava Kama. Right? And you, of course, are all going to tell me everything about what you have to know,
PI.
definitions, right? And you're going to give me structures, right? Great. Wow. And I will walk away beaming with nachas. Okay, what's the second mission here? Let's see if we can do at least the second, maybe third mission. Brachos.
Well, the case. Right?
Well, somebody should say the mission. That would be nice. Who's going to say
I have it
it?
here.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's right. Okay, good.
From what time? It's assuming that there is based on the fact that there is an obligation to read the Shema. From what time do you read the Shema in the morning? And on that there's a machlokes. Right? The main opinion is Mishiyake Beit Techeles Lovon, when a person is able to distinguish between blue and white. And Rabbi Eliezer says Beit Techeles Karti, between blue and green, which is actually really slightly later because those colours are closer to each other.
Yes.
Now that is the opening time, like the opening season, the opening hours for reading the Shema. The closing season, the Gemara, when should you finish it? Ideally, ad honetzachama. Right, he should be actually finished it for the moment that the sun rises. Rabbi Yeshua, Rabbi Yeshua, who's more lenient, says that you can actually read it ad shalosh shas, until 3 seasonal hours. Right? Why? Because this appears to be a takona. Shekain derech b'nei malachim la'amad b'shalosh shas, because that is normally the way of the b'nei malachim, with distinguished people. They get up later, and Chazal adapted the mitzvahs so that they were able to actually take part as well.
No, that's a definition.
But that's okay.
You see, that's a
Now that's the point. Is it or isn't it? I mean, It says a Gomra Chonetz Aretz Chonetz Chama.
It's a definition of when
Say
you go-
maybe that the
Yeah.
first part was more.
Okay. Oh, so you're saying that was also within the Tachonos of Kriyashma. Okay. I stand corrected. Hakare mikan va'elech lo hifsid kasher odam hakare b'Torah. But if a person actually misses the zone, he should still reach the Shema, and he will be rewarded as a person that's involved in Talmud Torah. Doesn't say that. Hakare mikan va'elech lo hifsid. Okay. But is that in the Mishnah?
No, it's not in the Mishnah. That's what the Mephoshim said. Gemara said, he does not lose the legitimacy of reading the Brachos that accompany the Shema. Okay?
But he lost the mitzvah say of reading the Shema this month.
Yeah, that he did. So the question
Which
is,
is therefore a pella. Why didn't it say lo hifsid?
Lo Hifsid the Brachos.
Say it, but since he is missing the time of Kriyat Shema, it's a pella to say lo hifsid.
Why not
Lo Hifsid
positive?
what?
From the Mashru of the from
Oh, the
the
Hava
words of the
is
Mishnah,
that-
one would think, what do you mean lo hifsid? I was mafsid zman Kriyat Shema.
Yeah, so that's why the Mephoshim say,
Yes.
because that would be, obviously, that expression is inconsistent.
It was a step
Yeah.
yes.
So it can't, Lo Hifsid cannot be referring to Shema, right, because he did lose it. But it refers to the brachos that accompany the Shema. Okay, what do we do now? What do we do first?
Yeah.
What's the preliminary ideas of this Mishnah? Right, remember what PI, preliminary ideas, then what is there? CI, central idea. Central idea area, right? The Mishnaic statements, the number, and I told you SI means supplementary ideas, if there are any propulsion and so on. Those are the 6 things you want to do in the Mishnah. And for the halacha, we have that sheet and so on, right? Okay, now, so what's the preliminary ideas to this Mishnah?
You know, before it seems basically this Mishnah shares pretty much all the preliminary ideas of the
Well,
first Mishnah.
Exactly. So the first Mishnah, we had a whole series of preliminary ideas.
And now we're just getting into the second Zman. What is the time of Kriyat Shema v'Shabbos?
Yes, so the preliminary ideas would be identical to the first Mishnah. Right? Remember what they were? Text, Kriya Shema, action is reading it, remember that? Frequency, twice. Right?
Source obligation.
Well, time,
The rice of
Yeah. the authority,
Sure.
right? The authority. And then you have, of course, it's not a time point, it's a time period. That would dictate that there's a beginning and an end.
Beginning end, which is the
Right, once a time period, and we're talking about beginning and end. And now, obviously, if its frequency is twice, then we're talking about the beginning and end of the time period. That's it. Now, along comes the Mishnah and says what? Now, what's the central idea of the first Mishnah? Do you remember?
The beginning and end time of the Arabic.
Evening time period, beginning and end. That's it.
And here's the
Because
more.
we've just built up the information that leads right into this Mishnah, right? Okay, good. So we have, and what's the area of that first Mishnah, if you remember?
It's a time.
Time.
obligation.
Time. Obviously, there's an obligation of when. It answers the question of when. Time. And obviously, the Mishnah deals with the evening and evening time period, beginning and end. Great. Okay. And then we have the amount of statements and so on.
And that fits into area, does it?
Was
Or
it?
I'm trying to see where that fits in on the diagram.
Well, that would be the area.
That would be the area.
Yeah. Actually, you see, the interesting, a CI is not a halacha. See, you have to remember, there are 2 things here. We itemize what you have to know in the halacha, and then you itemize what you have to know in a text called a Mishnah. Because remember, a Mishnah is a collection of halachas. So what you have to know in a Mishnah is going to be different than you have to know from the individual unit called a halacha. A Mishnah is a collection of halachas. So as a text, what do you have to know? So you have to know the preliminary ideas of this paragraph, right? Then you want to know the central idea of the paragraph. A halacha doesn't have a central idea, it is the unit. But the Mishnah has a central idea because it's a whole series of halachas in a given paragraph. You know what I'm saying? And that's critical. You should know, the central idea is probably, other than the statements itself, obviously, is the most important thing you could do about a Mishnah. Why? Because since it's central, it will tie in all the halachas in one idea. You could tie everything in. You see? And the second thing, for memory, it's fabulous. Because if you want to review Mishnah, always ask yourself, what was the central idea? And immediately, everything is connected. You connected the dots by that one idea, and it's much easier to remember. So, in other words, when I look at that first Mishnah and I say, what's the central idea? And I say, evening time period, beginning and end, wow. So there's beginning, 3 shitas, or whatever, 1 shita. Then the end, 3 shitas. And then the clarification of the Chachamim. That's it. I remember the whole Mishnah just from knowing that this is about evening time period, beginning and an end. You see?
In terms of the diagram, would it be better to label area and structure in terms of A and B?
That's how.
Because in terms of A and B, because they're controlling ideas for all for all these details.
They are organised.
No, I just think that they don't seem to be supplements to all the ideas, to ideas 1 to 6.
Yeah.
I would just say that could they be labelled in a different order, A and B?
Of what?
I tell you why. Because case, conduct, principle, essential, derivation.
Yeah.
And what happens under various conditions are sort of like they're already the details, whereas area and structure is the
analysis.
And that's why the area and structure, the analysis, doesn't follow from the 6 conditions. It's the other way around. It determines the 6 conditions. So what I was going to say is that could the area be, instead of given the number 7, could it be given an A, and could the structure be given a B? Because then it shows the relationship clearly between the synthesis and the analysis.
Really, there are 2 columns. There's a column called analysis, and then there's a column called synthesis. Really 2 different columns, which is what...
But they're not related to each other in the same way as items 1 to 6 are. It's a different order.
Yeah. One is talking about to organize them, to organize a halacha, right? So the question is, what area does that halacha go in?
Okay.
See, we've broken down the concept of halacha. Now we want to know where does it fit in a larger idea.
Now I was saying that's a separate question. That's a separate question, and therefore it should be shown on the diagram by a separate order of numerals instead of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Okay, fine.
It doesn't follow one. It should be A and B.
Okay, fine.
That's what
I didn't look at these. Okay, that's fine.
So, Tzvi, I didn't.
No
problem. It was just
the reason it's numbered.
Used to being beaten up.
I wasn't intending. I just.
The reason it's
That's
numbered.
fine. I'm not. The critical thing is that there are 2 columns. Column A is analysis, and that's enormous amount of hafchonas, which is distinctions. Then there's column B, which is a synthesis, which is to take all the distinctions and put them together. Very important. One of the A view. Okay. So we have what's the CI of that Mishnah, of that second Mishnah in Brachos? What is the central idea?
Morning time, beginning and end
of the morning time period. It's really it's identical to the first. Except now we deal with morning. Exactly. Yeah, same thing. So it's morning time period of Shema, beginning and end. There you are. Wow, what a difference. What?
It's too easy.
You're right. I should make it really harder. I apologize for making it easy. Anyway, so now what do we have? Now we want to understand the halachas, right? Okay, so the first beginning of halachas is what? Is the beginning. What is the beginning of that time period? Right? And what does it say in the Mishnah? It's an argument, right? The Tanakama, not Tanakama, the Tanakama holds. When does it begin? Who? Yeah. You have to be able to distinguish between 2 colors, blue and white. Okay. And that signals the beginning. Okay. And Rabbi Eliezer says, no, you got to be able to distinguish between blue and green. Clearly then, the question you're going to ask is, okay, what's the difference between the 2? And the answer would be, what is the difference between the 2? One is later. Why? Because it takes a lot more light to distinguish between blue and green than it does between blue and white. It needs more light. So therefore it's a later time period.
Are they disagreeing in when alos is, or are they disagreeing in how long into alos?
Well, that's the question. What exactly is the principle of what they say? Why? First of all, what's the principle in general of when you begin Kriya Shema in the morning, forget about the individual time periods, right? But the derivation.
So Uvkumecha.
Once again,
Uvkumecha. And what does Uvkumecha mean?
The time.
Arising.
Now,
And what's that?
What?
I had a question here. Do the Shitos carry through from the first Mishnah? In other words, is there
That's a good question.
Is
Well,
there
let's check it out.
position or
No.
action? Is it also
What do you
the sheet of Rabbi Eliezer? Does he hold by the same
Is Rabbi Eliezer consistent?
consistent?
We'll take a look. First, let's understand. Where's the derivation of the morning Kriya Shema? The answer of Uvkumecha. What does Uvkumecha state? Getting up. So clearly it refers to arising. Now, is arising a position or an action? It's an action. No way you could say a position. See, Uvashach B'cha can be either a position or an action, right? So that already can form a basis of an argument. But here, there's only one, Uvkumecha. Everybody agrees that's an action. It's not a position. You know what I'm saying? So we know therefore, that clearly the Torah says, Kriya Shema begins, right, with an action called arising. Now the question then is, what are they arguing about?
Yeah.
What are they arguing about? I mean, what's the problem here? I mean, people arise. What is the argument based on? What's interesting is you don't find a discussion about that. Certainly not in the Mishnah. What is the argument between Rabbi Eliezer really and Tanakama? I mean, what's the minute difference here? 5-minute difference, 10-minute difference?
What's the...
I mean, it's not a vast span of mitzvahs where there's an hour and a half difference between the two. No, it's got to be, So the real question, the first question I would ask is analysis. Is when would you logically say Kriya Shema begins in the morning? What's the reasonable idea first? Who?
After our loss.
After a loss.
Exactly. I'm not shaka. I mean, I'm not shaka. People get up.
Yeah, but that's the question. So if it's an action, so then what's the problem of whenever somebody gets up of saying Shema?
No, there is no problem. We're saying it would begin by Amuna Shacha. That's when the day begins.
Okay, but let's say a person gets up before Allah Shacha.
Then it's too
But
early.
if it were a true action, then whenever he gets up is when he says it.
Oh, so it's not personal. It's a right. It's
Right.
not. It's
collective.
It's a collective. Exactly. We learned that in the first Mishnah. When you go to sleep, does that mean you say Kriya Shema? No, it's when everybody goes to sleep.
That was Rabbi Eliezer's opinion. In other words,
No, it's also...
No. What was the difference between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Gamliel?
Rabbi Eliezer says that he wanted a minority of the opinion to get everybody in.
No, the first distinguishing idea between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Gamliel was what?
One was position.
And the other was action.
Action.
Exactly. Now, in Rabbi Eliezer was action, not position. Going to sleep, not being asleep.
Right.
Right? So going to sleep is an action. Right? So therefore he held, right, that's the major idea to focus on, right? That immediately differentiates him from Rabbi Gamliel. Now, in that itself, you can now distinguish two shittas. Right? Remember what I said last week? Does Rabbi Eliezer hold that when the majority has gone to sleep, or do we have to have everybody sleeping? And that was the Hava made by Rabbi Gamliel. Remember? When they asked him, who do they hold like? There were two ways to learn. You brought it down, remember that? Do the Chacham really hold like Rabbi Eliezer? That it's an action, not a position. So then what's the difference? Rabbi Eliezer says when the majority have gone to sleep, that's when it's over. And the Chachamim say no, not when the majority have gone to sleep, when everybody has basically gone to sleep. I'm not talking about today you really wonder because there's a night job. What about those guys? People don't even sleep the whole night. If you go to New York, Manhattan, you walk around there at 3 o'clock on 81st Street, you think it's the middle of the day. So, whatever happened to, going to sleep? Today in a society, everybody went to sleep because it was agricultural. Today, there's no such thing as going to sleep. It's almost like a real normal time,
Edison changed all of that.
Yeah, Edison changed all that, exactly. That's right, good old Tom.
Yeah, but you can still say at the time that people normally get up and the time that people normally don't,
Yes, obviously.
which is what the Gemara seems to imply.
Yeah, I was.
I mean, I'm sure even in the days of the Gemara, you had people that could actually manage on 2 hours sleep. Nothing remarkable. I can
Yeah,
think
but
of
that
two
was so
colleagues.
rare.
Well, one colleague of mine actually does manage on 2 hours sleep. It's just the way he is.
He what?
One colleague of mine actually manages to go to. One colleague of mine actually manages to function very happily on 2 hours sleep. I can't manage on less than 7, right? But it's just the way things are.
But the Rabbi Gamliel, was awake when his children came home.
Yes.
Right? So then he was pulling an all-nighter, right?
Hey, that's
observation. Or did he go to sleep and wake up for Chatzos?
No, he wasn't.
But the reason why he was up because he was learning to.
He was learning, yeah.
In both missions,
Anyway.
in both missions, we're dealing with a spectrum. In the first one, at night, we're dealing with from time when when it first gets dark,
Yeah.
and to the far end of the spectrum is to when the last time when people lie down.
Yeah.
In the morning, we're dealing when it first gets light, which is time bound, to the last part when people get up, like when the princes wake up.
So getting up is also not. It's not.
There's a spectrum from
Yes.
light, dark and light to
Light
lying
versus
down
dark,
and getting up.
arising versus sleeping. Yeah, So the question is, what you would normally say is, well, from Amuna Shacha, or Aloisa Shacha, that's when it begins. So automatically, neither of them say that, right? Which is interesting.
But also,
They're not even talking about Amuna Shacha, right? So they're talking about what?
The ending time.
They're talking about what are they clearly referring to? They're not referring to the event called Amuna Shacha. What are they referring to?
The event of the actual kima. What is the time that...
How late?
No.
How late can you do?
No. Again, they're not referring to, neither of them are interested in what? In an astronomical or a daily event called sunrise and sunset. They're not interested in that.
No, they're interested in what is for whatever the driving reason is, when is the time that people get up? Not based on the astronomic.
The question is, why?
why exactly?
Why is, no, obviously when people get up, that's the wrong way of saying it. Obviously because it says, ufkumecha, people getting up, that's what it says. But when you look at that, okay, so we know that the criteria has to be when people get up, not when it hits alas hashachar. Yes? Okay, so when you look at when people get up, what therefore do you focus on? If you know that when people get up is when the Zman begins, then you need to focus on something.
Yeah, now,
And that's what they're focusing on.
the-
What is it? You need to look in what they say and pull out the focus. What is it?
the Maaseh,
This is analysis.
no, I had a question about...
No, forget the question.
No, about the Maaseh that's brought here.
Yeah?
The B'nai Malachim, you know?
Oh,
Do they get up because of the time? That's the last time that they can say Kriya Shema? And still say Kriya Shema?
No, that's when they get up. They get up in 3 hours. These guys, they're princes.
But with that,
They don't have to do work.
so then that's
Other
the question.
people do their work. What do they have to get up for? So they have the luxury of sleeping.
But they still
late.
have to say Kriya Shema.
Yeah, okay, you mean for themselves. Okay, what do they do for themselves?
No, I mean, but why would you model a halacha after what the princes are doing if there's another principle? Not the principle.
Because princes are in the extreme minority. We're not worried about them. We're worried about the average person. When does he stay? It's Kriya Shema. Until what? Yeah, it's a good question. Okay, if the end time is when they get up, so when did they say Kriya Shema? When
They
did
don't
they
say
say
Kriya
Kriya Shema?
Shema.
That's a very valid point.
Princesses don't say Krishna.
Maybe.
Maybe you have a slave who says...
Because they're not Jewish.
Near himself.
It's a Dumea,
They have a servant who says...
king.
My turn.
The question is, who are the B'nai Malachim? Are they Goyim or Jews?
They must be Edomites, you know.
Okay, I will bring a raya that are all Jews.
Okay.
You know what the raya? Because every Jew thinks he's a prince. So B'nai Malachim means Jews. Because which Jew is not a prince?
You got
And every
the prince
Jewish woman
I don't think
he's
David
a
Melech-
princess.
I don't think David
That's where the problems begin. Anyway,
She's a queen. Not a princess, a queen.
I don't think that David Melech.
It all depends, on who you married. Either way, you
All
follow
the
races. Anyway, but getting back to the Mishnah, again, if the criteria of the beginning of the morning Kriya Shema is what? Is not Amar Shacha. It is what?
Intensity of
Is
light.
it's
Getting up.
Intensity of illumination.
oh, great.
It's what?
Let's say again?
It's sufficiency of light. That's what determines. In other words, when do people get up?
Right.
Why? There's got to be enough light to function. There's no light, what's the point of getting up?
Mhm.
Oh, so therefore their focus, once they understand the concept of arising, right, what is the determinant for arising? And the answer is, sweet, you just came out with it. It's sufficiency of light. See, isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
It's light sufficiency. That's why I'm not bothered with Amar Shacha. Because people don't get up when it's dark. People get up when there's sufficiency of light to function.
It's only when they.
Therefore, they're now focused on light sufficiency. But there's a machlokes. Right?
The question is, what
How much
for
light?
what light? What kind of lighting do they need to be sufficient?
Oh,
It's cognitive.
so let's
The
see
whole
if we
thing
can
is
figure that out. So that was a very important contribution. When we look at the difference, of Kamecho depends on light sufficiency. What is the determinant for arising? The answer is light sufficiency. Now, the question now is, so why should there be an argument here?
Maybe
Any ideas?
there's a different opinion on what takes chashivus and what I have to get up for.
Oh, keep going with that idea.
For
When does the majority
example,
get up as
maybe the Tanakhama says between chelas the cart because the ikar thing is to have the ability of accepting all machashman upon oneself and therefore being able to be makir the tzitzis.
Very good. Good. Maybe Tanakama holds that the light sufficiency of tzitzis is sufficient. Because that's what I'm focused on, doing mitzvahs. So as soon as I can recognize between blue and white, I'm up. Because I want to be able to mekayim the mitzvah tzitzis immediately. Whereas Rabbi Eliezer holds that what? That maybe it's not the mitzvah, the light, the sufficiency of light for a mitzvah, it is a sufficiency of light for general functioning. And that is between blue and green. That's a later time period. That's an idea. I've never seen it, but that's very good. Hey, you guys are doing good. But you see what we're doing? We're analyzing what is the determinant. We know what the derivation is, but what is the determinant of the shittas once you understand the derivation? And the answer is light sufficiency. Then the question is sufficiency for what? Which function? Is it the kiyum of a mitzvah, let's say, or is it functioning in general? There you are.
So this would go under principle, wouldn't it? Under the
Yes,
principle.
yeah, that's right.
So that's
The
high.
determinant is always a principle, exactly. In other words, we know the derivation of Kumecho, right? What principle arises from this? And the answer is light sufficiency. And then within that, okay, sufficient for what? You see? Now that's a nice shot. That's really an understanding of what they're arguing about.
So that would fit in with Rabbi Eliezer Shita from the previous Mishnah.
That what?
That
Yeah.
what you're doing, what the collective
Well, we don't
is
know
doing.
that yet. Let's get to the
okay.
Goimra. So, and then Rebbe Eliezer says what? That when do you end it? The Goimra when? By Netzachamo.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So there, what do we see? Well, why Netzachamo? What's the machlok between Rebbe Eliezer and Rebbe Yeshua? One holds Netzachamo, when you begin to see the sun, and Rebbe Yeshua holds 3 hours. Yes? So what's the difference then between?
One is a point in time,
No, it's the end time.
the end time.
End time of Prishma, right?
It goes up, I think.
Who's,
By nets, it goes up, goes down.
is that? Yeah, so then what does Rebbe Yeshua say?
Oh, really?
My
It's
question
easier
is,
now, this time of the year.
my question is, which planet do you live on? When was the last time you were up and running at Netzachamo?
No, wait.
Yeah, if you're
Well, now
in
it's-
Vesikin. What?
Some minions daven with that, some used to daven.
Yeah, okay, it's Vesikin. If you're a Vesikin guy, no problem. On the contrary, that's when you increase Shema, right at that point, right? But the 99.99% of mankind.
In those
is not
days,
done.
it's
When do
agriculture,
people
you
leave
have
to
be
go
out
to
and
the
going.
field to work?
Okay, yeah. So Rabbi Eliezer holds what? What would his sheet be?
Everyone's out of the house by nets, because they have to
No,
work.
not, then what does Rabbi Yeshua do?
They say not everybody.
Well, also the question is, when Rabbi Eliezer says that, is he saying that as that's the Ikar din? Or is he saying that
That's a different question.
to be... Yeah.
Wait,
but that's,
wait, that's secondary. Well, first we understand what's the machlokes.
Is that a second, that's the secondary?
That's the next point we can say, yeah. Even according to Rabbi Eliezer is the chatchilu b'diavad, you know, you can ask that, you know. But what's the argument here? What can be the argument between these people?
Because,
And the answer would be,
because
Rabbi Eliezer holds,
that
since it's right, Rabbi Eliezer holds, the majority have awakened by that time. And he goes by the majority, which interesting enough is exactly what it says in the first Mishnah.
That's right.
The majority of people have gone to sleep by then, right?
And we
And
go by
therefore,
the action.
exactly. So he's consistent in his shita.
But Rabbi Eliezer gives us a time
The
in
Goyma,
Mishnah.
which
Why
one?
you go
First
for
Mishnah, second Mishnah.
second.
Yeah, Goyma Adam Netzacham, but it doesn't say why. Does he? What's the principle? Why?
No, Rabbi Yeshua
Because
has a
of being
principle.
so made glue of the tefillah.
No, that's
No,
what the Rav says.
you're
That's
assuming.
not-
That's the
not
Rav,
what,
it's not
no.
the Mishnah.
No, I mean, so what would be the principle? Because he holds the time is the majority. And Rabbi Yeshua holds the time is all.
Like,
That's all. Like working of meal.
yeah.
Time is what?
All,
Like
everyone.
Brother and God
I mean,
meal.
99.99%. I mean, those guys who get up later, you know, those are like, you know, King of Kings and all that stuff, you know. But everybody else is basically up by 3 hours in a day. That's all.
Why didn't they say when the kings get up? Because they got up early, unlike their children.
To feed their kids, you know, when they get up, have breakfast ready.
Their kids.
I think there's a danger when one tries to classify a Mishnah, like say for example the machlokas over which colour, as according to which explanation you read into the difference between Tanakam and Rabbi Eliezer. I mean, one explanation that was given, the explanation that was given, B'nai Malachim and so on, was one particular explanation, which would have bearing on how you actually fit it in. Do you see what I mean? I mean, if you're trying to put everything into categories, sooner or later you're going to come up into an area where you have to take a stance as to what is the machlokas between one opinion and another opinion.
Yeah, but it's all tentative. Is it Vaday? We don't know.
And what would happen would be that you'd be going into a different dimension when you start.
I need to hear a specific, you two general. What do you specifically say?
I'll say
In
like
terms
this.
of this Mishnah.
In terms of this Mishnah,
Yeah.
right? When you have to place the Mishnah into these boxes, into these afonas, right? It would depend on your explanation on the explanation given of the havchana.
Which comes first, the Havchana or the explanation? Which one is first? I understand.
The explanation.
Which one's first?
The explanation, sure.
Because
firstly you have to explain what it's about, and then you're trying to see which box you put it in, or would it be the other way
Maybe the
around?
reverse.
the brain comes from.
Maybe I need to hear a principle here. Now let me think of a principle.
But the principle
And the
would
principle
depend.
is a determinant.
But the principle would depend on the explanation that you actually give.
No, a principle simply means an
Could be
underlying
driving.
idea.
Could be driving.
You now have a choice what you choose
Oh,
to
I see.
explain. It's up to you. I can have one explanation as a principle. A principle is a status of a thought. It's a relationship that this halacha is determined by something. A principle is a determinant. It's a word, you know, so you may have one determinant and I have another, so fine, okay, that's what Torah comes in. But a determinant is still a determinant. It's what's called it's a conceptual category. You know what I'm saying? And we have a choice what we want to say. Anyway, so it's interesting. We have an interesting understanding. Are we right? Hopefully. But somebody may come on course and say, no, I have a different reason why there's a machlokes between Tanakam and Rabbi Eliezer. Right? But this is very nice. Light sufficiency seems to be clearly, and the question is, well, what constitutes light sufficiency for what? So maybe somebody has a different idea. That's fine. But at least I'm moving, thinking, and conceptualizing, and so that's the critical part. I don't care if you come up with the right answer or not. The really thing is you came up with the right box. That's the critical. You knew that you needed to answer a principle. What your principle is, okay. But that's what would bother me more, that you were not even aware that you had to know a principle. That's bothersome, because you're way off then,
I was wondering, the princesses are the latest of all getting up.
Yes, the
The
principles.
latest, the latest.
Well, yeah.
Why would we go to the latest? You should go to the majority.
Well, that's Rebbe Eliezer.
Yeah, that's the,
No,
That's Glimra. Because the majority of people in an agricultural society, remember, they don't have any candles they have, but they don't have light bulbs, so they need to take advantage of the sun.
Okay,
That's why they're into light.
Okay, but I'm talking about the one that says that when the princes get up.
Yeah, Rabbi Yeshua.
Okay, that's way
That's
out.
later on.
Very
Sure.
late, okay.
Yeah.
Why would we go so far?
We went so far.
Because he holds Ufkamecho, the Torah says, Ufkamecho, your rising, it refers to a rising of mankind, everybody. That's what he holds.
Yeah, but that's the
And
latest.
that's
Doesn't Rabbi Gamliel hold
That's like
something?
Rabbi
But we possibly like that. And Rabbi Gamliel holds the same exact
His sons
thing
are like
at
princes.
night, when everybody's sleeping, and so,
Yeah, but what
or,
I'm trying to ask is that when the princes get up, they get up the latest of everybody.
Presumably.
more or less,
Presumably,
more
right?
or less.
Why would we go to such an extreme if that's not the majority? The majority maybe gets up at 9, let's say 8 o'clock, I don't know. Princes get up at 10, why would we go to 10 o'clock? That's what I was trying to ask.
Okay, because we don't know what the Torah is. When the Torah says Ufkumecho, we do not know what it refers to. Does it refer to the majority of mankind, or does it refer to the totality in general of mankind? And there's always guys getting up later, but in general, that's what it is. That's the argument. What does it refer to? The majority, the totality.
And his question could also be asked, why are we going to a vast minority? Maybe that's what he's trying
Yeah.
to say. In other words, there's
Why
a
are we
vast
going
minority.
why are we going
Yeah,
on the minority of the princesses?
This is like vast minority.
10
It's like a
o'clock,
1%.
where the majority
1%.
gets up at 8.
but it's subsumed
Because
into,
then let me ask you something. Fine,
Yeah.
okay. But so if we do not hold the majority as the correct boundary, right, and we hold totality, how are you going to measure totality? You got to pick somebody that's at the end. I understand.
All right.
The choice is either majority or totality, right? Okay, so majority nets, but you got to pick somebody for totality. That these guys are the last guys up, so that's totality. You know, even though it's rare. I mean, how many play Rochem? But if you want to measure totality, you got to go to the end of this stuff, more or less. Princes, right? You know what I'm saying? How else do you get totality? You can't. You agree that it's not the majority, so it's a totality. Yes, the criteria is totality. Question is, okay, we need a measurement for totality. You know what I'm saying? So we need to pick something at the end, more or less, and that happens to be these guys, and that's 3 hours of the day, first 3 hours of the day. You assume by 3 hours of the day, everybody's up.
How can we overlook the word Shechein Derech? It doesn't say Shechein B'nei Malachim, it says Shechein Derech B'nei Malachim.
Yes.
That, this is the way, but lots of people have that way, even if they're not B'nei Malachim.
Yeah, yeah.
So it'll be
That's
the
right.
majority.
That's right. That's a good point.
Larger
Yeah,
minority.
it's a good point. The word says because B'nai Malachim. What's it there? Because there are people, so that would sort of like answer what he's done. That it's not just it's not a rare event. There are many people that can get up at 3.
Like the Malachim, like the kings?
Exactly. Well, yeah. Well, you figure.
Well, it's like you're saying, we're all,
No, but who are these guys? Who are these guys? Which guy? No. Yeshiva guys get
Early
up
guys.
at Chatzois.
Which is you go.
How do I know? How do I know? Because if you go to the Shtita, right, they have minyanim to Shachris to Chatzois. That's how you know. And half of it is Yeshiva guys who missed the first year. How else do you know? In fact, that's how you find out. Just go to the Shtiblich. If you want to define totality, just go to either the Shtibel or Meir Sharm or Zichron Moshe. You know exactly what the totality is. You know, that would be who knows if they had In those days, they had their own Meir Sharm and Shtiblach there, you know, so, you know. But anyway, so the question is, good point, who else would get up like kings? And the answer is, if you're not an agriculturalist, you're not a farmer. If you have a business, you don't have to get up at Netzachama. If you have a business, what's the point? And Netzachama varies, you know, in the winter, you know what I'm saying? Or in the summer, it goes to like 5 o'clock. That's his 5, you know. Why does a business guy have to get up at 5 o'clock? He's running a shop. Nobody's going to be shopping, basically. Only a farmer wants to take full advantage of the sun, because that's what his crops are. It's all about doing what's in the day. He needs full daylight. But a businessman or a professional doesn't have to get up at nets. So that would be conform to what you're saying, that it's der b'nei melachim, which is very good.
And in those days,
you know what I'm saying? It's not
it's good work, yes.
Yeah, you know, it's
And in those days, the vast majority of people were involved in food production.
In what?
In agriculture.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. That's why we have Rabbi Eliezer holding the majority of farmers, and they're up by sunlight, because they need the sun all the, you know, and so on. Exactly, you know. But Rabbi Yeshua says no. There are many, obviously, people that don't need that, and so on. Yeah.
So would the shear change as civilization changes?
That's a very good question. Is that shear dependent on the Zman, means the time of civilization? Maybe. You know, that's a very interesting question.
Yeah,
because
we talking about
why? Because notice it doesn't say in the Torah for Erev, but Laila and for Erev. So then that would be right. That would be dependent on time, right? But it says it's an action or a position that takes place in time, and that could vary. Yeah, that's a variation.
Makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense. Sure.
It's not just change, but also Shabbat. I'm thinking many minyanim started, like in America, started 9:30.
Oh, come on.
No, they started 9:30.
No,
People have to say Shabbat.
I don't square starts chakras at 9:30.
It's very typical.
Shabbat over here.
Very
It's quarter to 8, and we're done by 10:30 later.
Which is in
They start 10.
Really? 2.5 hours?
Shabbat, 10 o'clock, 11 to 10 o'clock.
Say the whole thing before that.
Yeah, what?
Say the whole thing before that.
It's that poses a different issue for saying Shabbat.
That's a very good question. Since it's getting up and going to sleep, is that dependent on the time, the culture, whatever you want to call it, you know? The minute.
Or your subculture, maybe. You know?
Customary, yeah. Yeah, exactly. It's a good question. You know. Okay, so, and now, what does it say in the last? Vakar mikanu v'ilach? He does not lose what? Not Shema, because that doesn't make sense. He did lose Shema. Mikanu v'ilach, he just lost it. So, Lahifzit cannot refer to Shema. It has to refer to something else, so therefore refers to the brachos that accompany. Yes? Okay, fine.
So that's PI. That comes from preliminary information.
Well, where does this fit? Well, this is also, this sprang out of nowhere. So where does this fit? How do we begin to look at this? In other words, the brachos that accompany the Shema is not
what
the
brings
Shema.
you over there? What takes you to the brachos that accompany the Shema?
Well, because
I'm saying,
what the Mishnah clearly wants to tell you is what?
Well,
what's the Mishnah saying?
Without looking at
There's
the
still
first,
benefit if you go beyond the time.
you get
That's
credit.
what it says, but what does it really say?
Yeah.
What does it say?
The
Brachos are a part of the
not
Shema.
necessarily-
What?
The brachos are a part of the Shema, not fundamental part,
That's-
a connected aspect of it.
That's an assumed, but that's not what it says.
Okay.
What does that statement say? Forget about Kol Makor.
That means that there's something that you do lose. That's the obvious.
No, what does it say?
To refer
What's the
to-
Chiddush here?
It's saying that the action of reading the Shema
Yeah.
is
What's the Chiddush?
it's referring to the action of the person who's read the Shema has done a mitzvah.
No.
He hasn't wasted his time.
No, forget the Kol Makor Torah.
There are people who
We're
wake
talking
up
about
later
Lo
than
Yifsid
the
is on the
middle of-
brachos.
Yeah,
What
okay,
does
I
it
mean,
say?
it doesn't say that in the Mishnah.
No, but this,
What does it say?
you know, many times a Mishnah will make a statement, and you have to ask yourself, what does that say really? The Mishnah may say it, you know, it's called style. Many times if you want to communicate a message, right? So there are different styles of expression. People have different styles of saying the same thing, using different words and so on. Fine, okay.
So without
But then you always have to ask yourself, what is the real message? Don't get confused by the style. What is the message here?
It seems to be teaching us that a certain, I guess the essence of what is Berachos creation.
No.
There's an
No.
endpoint. There's an endpoint.
Again, what does it say? Don't forget about Brachos and what you like to hear it says. No. You need to focus on Pshat. What is this man saying?
If you go past the Zman of Kriya Shema, there's what to be gained. If you go past the Zman of Kriya Shema, there's what to be gained.
Well, yes.
There's how
That's
much
what
did
it
you
says.
lose?
But what is he really saying?
There's what to be gained.
All you're doing is telling me what it says. But I'm telling you, when you look at something, what it says, and then ask him, what is he saying, it could be a different slant
He's saying
than what it says. Except his style of what he's saying, he used this form of said. Got it?
Yes, I got it.
That you
Okay,
still
now,
have a
so the
chiyuv-
question, what?
That you still have a chiyuv to say the Berachos Kriya Shema.
He's saying,
Even though the Zman of Kriya Shema has passed, you still have a chiyuv to say the Brachos of Kriya Shema.
No, he's not saying chiyuv.
Well, it
He
can
never talks about
choose.
bracha. This is assumed. This is the PI that there are brachas that accompany a right, and that you should be saying them together with Kriya Shema. That's a PI. It doesn't. But that's not what he's saying, right?
Can I
No.
say something?
What's he saying? Yes, you know.
Okay, he's
No.
saying
Yeah.
that on the brachos you do not lose, but on Shema you do lose.
No, that's not what he's saying. No.
But he's saying
You're right, that's what
he's
he's-
saying. You're not losing on the brachos.
No, that's what is said. No.
Right.
You say the
But he's
Zman
saying-
of Kriya Shema is not finite for all aspects of Kriya Shema.
Say that again.
The Zman of Kriya Shema is not finite for all
Not
aspects of
finite. No, finite's the wrong
It's
word.
not all inclusive
For what?
for all aspects of Kriya Shema.
Keep going.
Because there is another part to Kriya Shema, the Brachos, which can be
Extended. Okay, so what
Yeah.
he's saying is this. We would think that Kriya Shema ends at 3 hours. So we may think that everything that accompanies Kriya Shema has the same time boundary. Right?
I see it.
So the Chiddush is no. Even though they're said together, the time boundaries are different. That's what he's saying. Do not think because brachas come together with Shema, right? Because that's what happens, right? And therefore the boundaries of time are identical. Do not think that. That's when lo hifsid. But it means you don't lose, you can still say the brachas. So what's the Chiddush? Because the time of brachas is not identical to Kriya Shema, even though it's said together with Kriya Shema. What? That's a Chiddush.
So that's davening.
Wait. You understand what I just said? In other words, he's saying anybody who reads it afterwards doesn't lose. What's the implication? Why doesn't he lose? Because the time for both are not identical. You would think maybe they are identical because they both are said at the same time. You always say the brachas at the time of Kriya Shema. They're never said separately, really. So we would say they're not said separately, right? They're always said together, so we would say that, wait a minute, maybe the time is the same. So he's saying, no, even though they're said always at the same time, do not think that the mitzvah of the brachas is the same time as the mitzvah of Kriya Shema. That's a chiddush. It's an important idea, because it takes us away from what we would have thought. Got it? That's what he's saying. The way he said it is lo hifsid. And the implication is lo hifsid. Why? Because you can continue saying it. So what's the saying? So he's saying, don't think that the brachos of Kriya Shema has the identical Zman of Shema, even though they're always said together. There are independent time boundaries. That is what he's saying. Got it?
Yeah. One question.
That's all he's saying.
Another question.
One question.
Everybody got that? Do you see the difference between what is said and what he's saying? Yes? That's what I'm trying to illustrate here. Don't focus on what is said. I mean, you focus on it, but always ask yourself, what is he saying? You see, and many times you'll find, wow, what he's saying is different than what is said, except that was his style of saying it. That's a very important nekuda. Why? Because there are guys that learn Mishna and Gemara, and they can repeat what it said. All they did basically is translate it. That's all. All you need is a translation here.
You didn't get it.
But that's not what you have to, when you learn, the real analysis is what is this man saying?
It's a question about, it's getting it, it's getting it.
Okay, do you get it? But you hear, this is what you get. You get that even though you always say them together, it's not the same time boundaries.
Can you also
That's
ask,
the first idea. And the second idea is what? That's when you analyze this, that's the first idea you come away with, what he's saying. But in what he's saying, there's a very important idea about what? What is the important idea here? You gotta chop this.
The Brachos is a different time period. We have to figure out
That's what he's, we
have to figure out what that time period is for the Brachos.
No, that we know, that's what he's saying. But what's the assumption under that, which is very important? Tell me, what?
That I still have a mitzvah even to recreate Shema.
No, he doesn't say that. It's over with.
Doesn't say that, doesn't...
No.
I don't have.
What's the chiddush about the brachos? Forget about Kod Makor Torah. What is the chiddush? There's a second very important concept which is assumed, but you need to recognize. What is that?
The Brachos and the Shema are a different status.
Yes, that there are two mitzvahs here. One is Shema and the other is Brachos. And they are independent of each other. That's what it... Notice, not only are we dealing with the mitzvah of Shema, we are dealing with the mitzvah of Brachos. And that's a different mitzvah, even though they're set together. Don't think that they're one mitzvah. They're not. They are independent. To such an extent where they are independent in terms of their time boundaries. So now when you organize Shema, what are you going to organize? You're going to organize Shema text, the action is recitation, and Brachos accompaniment, and its boundaries. Brachos accompaniment has its own halachas. How you say it, when you say it, what you say, etc., etc.
That's what allows you.
It now filled in a second aspect of the structure. That the structure deals with Shema, and then there's another mitzvah it deals with called Brachos, which accompany it. And by the way, there's going to be a third mitzvah, which is...
No, I was just wondering something.
Yeah.
Why there's a separation? Why one is lost and why one is not lost?
Well, because Shram ends at 3 hours and you
No,
missed
but
it.
why? But why do we have to
Because
have a
Ufkamecha.
boundary?
Because this...
Ufkamecha.
Yeah, of course. Ufkamecha is what did it, right? In fact, what's the origin of the Brachos? Why do we say Brachos by Pri Shema? I don't know if you know that, because that's in the...
You know, it fits in with the...
Well, why do we even say it? Well, what I'm telling you is two very important ideas that, just by analyzing it. One is that Brachos time is different than Shema. And don't think they're different, even though we say them together. And the second thing is, well, that's interesting. If the times are different, clearly they're two different mitzvahs. So we now have two different mitzvahs to deal with. Shema and Brachos. You see what's going on
yeah,
here?
but is it possible to explain the Mishnah in far simpler terms than bringing the Brachos in?
Yeah.
There are in fact two aspects of the mitzvah of the Shema. One of them is there's a requirement to read the Shema. And
Yes.
part of
And
that
there's the
within it
acknowledgement.
is the time that you actually say it.
Yes.
Now this contrasts with say something like Lulav, because with with the Arba meaning. Because if you haven't, because you've got all day to
You're
take the
focused
Arba.
on Shema.
You know,
I'm
and
talking about Brachos.
Can you just hear me out?
Yeah.
Because with Arba meaning you've got all day. If you miss it, you're wasting your time by taking it at night. Whereas Masha'en came with the Shema, because with the Shema, within the mitzvah of the Shema is reading it at the right time. Is reading it at the right time.
Go ahead.
But if you haven't been able to read it at the same time,
Yeah.
you have actually carried out the rest of that mitzvah. So that's the
Well,
mitzvah
which
of
mitzvah?
the mitzvah of reading the Shema.
But that's later, when it says Ka'odem HaKor B'Torah, I'm not focusing on that statement. I'm focused on HaKor Mikam V'Ilech Lo Yifsid, stop.
He hasn't lost the whole mitzvah of Kriya Shema.
No, it doesn't refer to Kriya Shema, it refers to the Brachos. He hadn't lost the ability to say the
No, I'm
Brachos.
saying that one have to bring the Brachos in at this stage, because later on they could
You know,
talks
let me
about
tell you
Brachos.
something. Go ask Rebbe.
Yeah. Well, Rebbe brought them in much later on. That's the reason that I
Yeah, he brought it. So the question, he brings it really in the fourth Mishnah.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? But all of a sudden he just throws it in the second Mishnah when we're not doing this. You see, but listen, you know, we need to analyze what Rebbe does. Why Rebbe does this is a good. He could have very well said what, that the time limit of Brachos is whatever it is, Chatzois, whatever it is. He could have done that in the next the Mishnah where it's appropriate. What do you throw it in here? Because clearly what he wants to distinguish here right, is that even though they're always said together, do not think that it's really one mitzvah. It's really two. That's his focus. And therefore, you have two different time boundaries. But those are two ideas which are very important. You see? One is that Brachos has nothing to do with Kriya Shema, intrinsically, but we say it together anyway. The second thing is, since it really has nothing to do with that, it has a completely different time element. That's the Chiddush here. Now, why he brought it here, not later on? Okay,
Rabbi, that fits in with the central idea of Brachos.
Which one? The Brachos?
Yeah, getting acknowledgement. Acknowledging it.
Exactly, yeah.
That fits right in. I mean,
how do we know that? Where's the mitzvah of saying these 7 brachos? By the way, there's 7 of them. Shema in the morning is 2 before, 1 after, and in the evening 2 before and 2 after. Right? And so, well, the morning is what? Is Yotzeh HaModros. The second one is Ava Rabbo, and afterwards is one bracha called Emes Yatziv. At night there's what? There's Marav Aravim, there's Avas Olam, and then the last 2 is what? Is Emes Ve'emuna, and then we have Hashkivenu. There you are. So what's the origin of this? We would wait a minute. There's 2 different mitzvahs. Excuse me, what's its derivation? The answer is because there's a pasuk in Tehillim, and this is only later information. But you gotta, it's called it says Sheva b'yom hilal ticha. 7 times in the day I will praise you. So Chazal decided that we need to give 7 brachas as a result of that, because of that Tehillim imperative. Now, where do we say that? And when do we say it? So Chazal decided, this is their decision. That's a takana. That the origin of the chiyuv of brachas is Sheva b'yom hilal ticha. Where do you say it? Well, you know what we'll do? Let's appendage it to Kriya Shema. You know what I'm saying? So what they did is they took those 7 brachas and they divided it. 2 in the front, 1 in the back, 2 in the front by Marav, and 2 in the back. That's what they did. But really it's an independent mitzvah, and therefore in a diagram about Shema, you need to put down also there's Shema 1, and then there's what's called a Shema expansion, which is the brachas. And then there's also a Shema extension. There's a 3rd mitzvah here that Chal appendaged to Shema. What is that? What is that?
There's a connection between Shema, Geula, and Tefillah.
No, that would determine timing, proximities. No, there's another mitzvah. The Shema text has an extension and has an expansion. There's the Shema text is one. The expansion is the brachas, but it's really a separate mitzvah. Then there's also, but since it's recited at the same time, I'm calling it a Shema expansion. But there's another mitzvah, which is also appendage. What? To mention Yitzias Mitzrayim. There's a separate pasuk. The Mantiskos Yom Seischom Eretz Mitzrayim, and that has nothing to do with Kriya Shema. But what Chazal did is they took that and they put that as part of the text, because that's Vayomer. That's Vayomer. That's exactly what I said. So really, there are 3 mitzvahs going on here. The Shema, its extension called Vayomer, which is Yitzias Mitzrayim, and its expansion called the Brachos because of Sheva b'yom hilal ticha.
And
that's it.
And that's what
Beautiful. And all that has to be in proximity to Shemona Esrei, which is a separate mitzvah. That's the mitzvah of tefillah. You see? Wow. It's separate mitzvahs. It's very simple. And therefore, in each mitzvah, you now have to say, okay, what is the mitzvah? What's the text? What is the action of each one of these things, right? What's the time? What's the frequency? You see? You immediately apply all the questions that we had to Shema to each individual mitzvah, because now we recognize their history. This is how you build a structure.
They cease becoming structure and their thought processes, because you can work through them.
Yeah. What I'm saying is that if you want to learn well, remember also a very important principle. There's what is being said and what he is saying. And what he is saying is much more elusive, true. But it's very valuable, it's critical. So what he's saying is a direct statement that Shema and Brachos are what? 2 different times, even though they're said together. And the implication of that is there's a chiyuv to say Brachos, which is independent of Shema. Beautiful. So we now form the structure that there are 2 mitzvahs going on. There's Shema, text, and there's Brachos, text. And each one of these now have to be addressed. Okay, what is the text? When do you say it? Where do you say it? How do you say it? Etc., etc. And that's how you create a structure of Shema. You see?
Well, why did you
I'm showing you what I'm doing, and that you always have to be careful with what he's saying. Saying, as opposed to what is said.
How do we know what Zman Tefillah has a
Tefillah?
limit? Zman Tefillah. How do we know?
Did you say tefillah or tefillin?
Tefillah. In other words, we know Krishma for yeah. Okay, you just. How do we know Zman Tefillah has a certain
Time limit?
Yeah.
Okay, so that
How do we know? I mean,
when you get to tefillah Sashacha, the fourth parak, that's when we'll analyze that. You're asking something that's no get to tefillah or Shemona Esrei. That's in the fourth parak.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's not even now. What I'm trying to do is show you, don't take anything for granted. When a Tana says something, he means it. But the problem is he doesn't always say it in the way that you have to know because of his style. See, don't confuse style with statement. It's a very important insight. And, wait, I'm sorry. And what's the implication of what is saying? See? What is the implication of that? So you want to know what is said, what is he saying, and what are the implications of what he's saying.
As opposed to what he said.
As opposed to what he said. And therefore you walk away with new ideas and how to configure the structure.
And also
context.
Sorry.
Why did you bring up the point over here as far as the mitzvah of Skaras B'tzitzis, right?
Because I
Why
wanted
did you bring
to...
that here?
Why here?
Yeah.
Because next week we go over Kamo. And I won't have the chance to do it again.
No, but why did you specifically mention?
No, what's the-
Because I wanted to
this
show
third
the
mitzvah?
Chiddush here that there's three things going on in Shema. There's the Shema, there's the Mitzvah Mitzrayim, and the Sheva B'Yoyim. There are three things going on simultaneously. Most people think it's one thing. No, there are three individual mitzvahs that are combined as one action. Very important idea. Most people say, yeah, it's all the same thing. You know, after Baruch it's all the same until you get to Shemona Esrei. Right? Isn't that what we think?
Yes,
Yes. What?
all Israel's together after Brachos, so...
Yeah, Baruch and Shemona Esrei, and then it's all the same thing. It's all Shema. No, it's not Shema. There are three independent mitzvahs going on that Chazal put them in the combination. You know, and so then we can ask, okay, why fix them here? But the chiddush, the important thing is that each one is independent and therefore can be said independently, really. Except Chazal did a takana, and they said, we put them together. But the truth is, like Shema here, because Brachos is independent, it can be said even if you forgot or you're after this man of Priya Shema. That's the chiddush here. No. It's three different mitzvahs, so therefore don't worry about it. You missed the boat on Shema, but you can still get the Brachos.
But isn't this all more unusual because it contrasts with virtually all other mitzvahs that are governed by time? I mean, the example I gave before about Lulav. Either you're in the time zone of Lulav, or you're with Arba meaning, or you're not.
Exactly.
Whereas with Shema, it's much more multifaceted. And that's the concept that if you miss the boat, you haven't completely missed the boat, you've only missed part of the boat.
Well, you missed part of what's called the company.
Part of the company. You missed, okay.
You know, it's
Otherwise you're going to sink.
Well, part of the building burnt down,
Yeah.
but you still have a couple of thin places. The building is still there. Only 5% of the building burnt down.
But that contrasts with virtually every other mitzvah that is time-bound. Like Tkir Shofar. Or,
you missed the boat.
You missed the boat.
Yeah. That's why it's now the next thing we analyze is Kodma Kerba Torah. So why is it lo yivsid the brachas? Because even though you say Shema, right, and you missed it, it's still as if you're reading the Torah. What is that supposed to mean?
Well, no, I think you can read...
What's the difference if it's Ka'oba Torah or not? What is the implication Ka'oba Torah? But what's the connection here?
That's because you have to say...
The brachos have company.
The brachos have company.
No, maybe the Adam...
You know, you're not, you haven't said it yet, but you're on the way.
Maybe the Adam that's reading the Torah is the guy at the Amud.
No. It's the guy who missed it. No, it's not the guy at the Amud. It's the guy who missed it.
Because
the brachos should be accounted with Shema.
What?
The gezer is the brachos should be in the location of the Shema.
Yes.
And even though you're not the kind of mitzvah, you still have the text.
Still what?
You still have the text.
Still have the text.
Which text?
Of the Shema.
Yeah, no, but the question is, what does that have to do with the brachos?
Brachos
There's
have
a,
to
there's a,
attach
there's a
to
connection
something.
here. In other words, why is it lo yifsid?
So lo yivatala.
It's telling you
Won't be
why lo
a-
yifsid, besides the fact that it's independent. You know what I'm saying? But what is this called?
There is a degree of interdependence.
What?
There is a degree of interdependence. The gezerah of Brachos it should be linked to saying the Shema.
Why? You're not saying why, you're just telling you what.
You're blessing Hashem, it's not a hafsid, you never.
No, it has no yifsid. No.
There's no such thing.
The bracha has to be attached to doing something or to saying something. So when you make a bracha, there's a reason you're making the bracha. If you just make the 4 or 3 brachas stam without having it attached to the Shema, then all you've done is said God's name 7 times, perhaps not properly. But when it's attached to the Shema, then you've got the Pa'ula, which is saying the Shema, even though it's not Bisman, that can the brachas can attach to.
Okay, let me refine what you're saying. It's not, what you see clearly is when Chazal attached the brachos themselves, the 7 brachos, did they attach it because you're doing the mitzvah, or did they attach it because there's a conceptual link between the two? Oh, so if they did it because it's a mitzvah, hey, too bad, mitzvah's over. So theoretically, I don't have to say the brachos. But if the attachment wasn't the mitzvah, but the attachment was the conceptual link, whatever that is, then what's the difference? It's called Maklir Torah, which means that there's still a conceptual link going on here, and therefore it's still appropriate to say the brachos together with Shema.
We do the same thing
You see,
earlier
now there's a link, and that's a classic hakira.
We
Yeah,
do,
right.
What
we
is
do
the
the
link?
same
So
thing
does this
when
mean
we
to-
say Birkas HaTorah.
What?
Everything that comes after Birkas HaTorah
Yeah.
is Torah.
Yeah.
We don't just make Birkas HaTorah, Zehu.
Well, next week, Bava Kama, first Mishnah.
Maybe, Rabbi, maybe it's one of these things where they're keeping a foreign element out, and that's being over saying a bracha levatela, like.
That what?
Maybe it's to keep this foreign element out. So you
Foreign
might be,
element? Which one? Brachos? What's
if
the
you
foreign
say a
element?
bracha with no action attached to it. So
Well-
that's the conceptual link, or one of them.
Yeah, well, but the Birchos Kriya Shema is not tied to a mitzvah. That is the mitzvah, is the bracha.
Oh, that is the mitzvah.
That's what Sheva B'Yom Hilal Ticha, the phrase itself is the mitzvah. I mean, that the bracha is the mitzvah. It's not a bracha it's not a Birchos mitzvah which precedes another mitzvah. That's that's what we learn here. These are independent brachas that have nothing to do with Kriya Shema, be'etzem. But if the link is conceptual, then we understand even if you're not yet to the mitzvah, you're still appropriate to do it. See, it's a hakira, it's a classic brisker hakira. Is it there because
So what's the
it's
answer?
That's what I was saying.
mitzvah?
It's like,
So what's the answer?
The fact that lo yifsid means it's not connected, it's conceptually connected, not mitzvah connected. Because the fact that lo yifsid, because then they
Yeah,
would say,
I mean,
then the Mishnah
may I
would say,
ask you-
okay, read it whenever you
When
want.
you say it's conceptual, what sense?
Okay, no, that's the next question.
Yeah.
What is this conceptual connection? No, that's a very valid question.
well,
That's the next to think about. Okay, what is the relationship between these brachas and the Shema conceptually? But the first thing you have to ask is what's the concept of the brachas altogether? Well, what are they talking about? What are they talking about? And what's Shema talking about? And what's the link? We know what Shema's talking about. You know what I'm saying? But what is the brachas referring to? You know what I'm
I
saying?
never thought about
But,
it.
And what?
It happened every morning. I never thought of that question. It's just part of the sacred
Exactly. Exactly.
yeah.
It's part of the ritual.
Part
It's
of
a
what goes
ritual.
on.
What?
I never actually asked myself the question,
Yeah,
so
what?
what's the difference between the Birchos Kriya, why the Kriya Shema is actually said at that point, and what the Birchos Kriya Shema have got to do with the Shema.
Exactly.
I've never bothered.
Yeah.
But, so does this mean,
Yeah. That's what happens when you learn in a certain way. Then everything immediately becomes subject to analysis. Even like, what does this have to do with that? I mean, clearly there has to be something in mind. Did Chazal place these brachas by Kriya Shema as a convenience? Because since anyway you say Kriya Shema, right, to make sure that you're not going to forget, well, connect it. Is that why they did it? As a convenience? Or, or there's something more. There's a conceptual link here, and so on. Therefore, it's appropriate to do that.
I mean, Geula after Yetzias Mitzrayim makes sense. Yetzias Mitzrayim straight on to Geula. But if you look at the ones before, Yotze Hamaras and
Mara,
not I can relate to, because at least with the Shema. But the one before, I'm stumped.
Yeah.
Why not do we say it? Yotze Hamaras, what's the stopping with question?
Yeah, okay. Very valid question. That needs analysis.
Amari Barobin.
Who?
Amari Barobin.
Yeah. So what would the answer to that be?
Who?
That's what Rabbi
think about it.
It sounds similar to Yosef Maravar, it sounds similar to Yosef Maravar.
Let me ask
They're both
something.
related to the planet, the bringing down, the evening
Pointing
bringing
in a
down
certain
the planet.
direction.
Well, that's what Rabbi
Anybody ever learn
learned,
Masech
you know?
Rosh Hashanah?
Yes,
Rosh Hashanah, anybody ever look at that? With Rosh Hashanah?
yeah.
Sorry,
Long time ago.
I missed the question.
What is a month, really? What is it? Don't tell me it's 30 days. That's the limit. That's the time span of a month. What is a month? Let me to make
Has to do with the
it.
moon.
It's what?
It's a chelik of a year.
It has to do with the moon.
I didn't ask you how to determine the month. I asked you, what is the concept called month? What is the concept called day?
It's a lunar cycle.
Month. No.
Month
Yes.
is chodesh, chodesh is
No, no. Come on. Think. I need to smell wood burning. What? We are going to look at first Mishnah of Kama. Yes? Okay, great. So, what do we look for in the Mishnah? We have the roadmap.
Case,
No.
the preliminary information, what you need to know before.
What you look for in a halach is one thing. No. But a Mishnah is a, what? It's a collection of halachas. Yes, so what do we look for in a Mishnah?
Central idea.
That's one. You need to have this in front of you. Or else after a while you'll know it by heart, so it's not a big deal. But if you don't have it in front of you, is that last week's?
Yes.
You have a couple of them? Great.
Rabbi, could I trouble you to slide over to the pathway over
Slide over.
Because,
Like this?
yeah,
I mean,
because you're
Why don't you
right
move
in
this
front of the
this
window.
way?
Because then someone will walk in and kick it.
Nah, he's not gonna kick it.
Okay, yeah, fine.
When you finish with all of this,
Yeah,
where's all this going to go?
it's going to go on DVDs and I'll give it to you.
Oh, okay, good.
Yeah, and then you can take it and they
Put
can
it on our
upload it.
website.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, that's good. So, what are the objectives of a Mishnah? Yes, but that's not what I mean. Right? What are they?
The one case conduct principle.
No, that's the halacha.
Okay.
What's that? What's the roadmap for a Mishnah? When you look into a Mishnah, you want to analyze it. What are the objectives, right? What are the categories?
First, you want to get the Mishnaic statements.
Who?
The Mishnaic statement.
No. First you want, well, it depends. If you're learning it for the first time, you're right, yeah. You want to know what's called the MS, or the Mishnaic statements.
Mhm.
What does it say? And you just go through the halachas, right?
Mhm.
And what's the most important part of the halachas? The case, the conduct, and the principle. What does the Mishnah say? What is the case, what is the conduct, and what is the principle? So that's the Mishnah itself. That's the Mishnah itself. That's the halacha, right? Okay. Then you'll notice that most of the time the Mishnah does not have a principle. It doesn't say it. I mean, it has it, but it doesn't say what it is. And that's one of the problems of Mishnahs. It doesn't have all the information really that you need to know. Because if you don't know the principle, what is a principle again? A principle is a statement, an underlying statement, that says, why is this the conduct to that case? Why? It answers the question of why. Okay? So that's what you have to have. It's the case, the conduct, and principle. And also it's good to know if it's min ha-Torah midrabanan. The authority is also very important to know. you know.
Essential conditions.
Yeah, and there's a whole slew, right? Remember what all 8 of them are? What the 8 ideas are. Oh, you have the paper there, so.
We have the paper there.
What?
We have the paper there set in
Yeah.
stone, so it's much easier.
Yes. Okay, so when you're learning a Mishnah, what do you want to learn? Now you're not into a halacha, you're into a Mishnah, which is a series of statements. So what do you want to know first? I mean, when you learn, you're going to learn the Mishnah first, obviously. You know. What we're going to try to do is identify what I call the PI. What are the preliminary ideas? Remember, Rabbi did not write a beginner's text. And that's why Mishnah is so difficult. There's a lot of information missing. You know, and therefore the Mishnah is really an intermediate text. So you have to know the PI. What's the preliminary ideas? What are those ideas that you need to know before you enter the Mishnah? And then the Mishnah takes off. It'll be either idea 4 or 5 or 6, whatever it is. And then you understand exactly where the Mishnah comes out of. So you have the preliminary ideas, 1, right? Then you have the central idea. In other words, all the halachas of the Mishnah are grouped under one idea. Central idea, which is very important. It is the organizing concept of the Mishnah. It's called the central idea. Okay? Then you want to know what's CI, the CIA. What is the area of the central idea? And that's going to help you synthesize it. Will you place it into the structure? You know what I'm saying? So you have the preliminary ideas, central idea area, right? Then you have the Mishnaic statements itself. What are they? How many are they? For memory, it's very important to delineate how many are there. And then I've added SI, supplementary information, which is, you know, are there any Rishonim and Achronim that are important to understand the Mishnah itself. So those are the 6 ideas that you will learn when you learn Mishnahs. Or you look for. Now you may find them, you may not find them. What?
Where 6 ideas? Preliminary idea, central idea, central
Idea
idea,
area.
Mishnaic statement.
Mishnaic statements, what are they? The actual halachas.
Yeah.
Then the number of them, how many are there?
Okay.
Yeah, because you want to delineate them for memory's sake. And then besides that, then you look for what I call SI, supplementary information. Yeah, because there's a lot of information, you know, Tosfos, they may bring you down a sheet of Tosfos or some Rishon or whatever, and it may be very important to know, because it's basic. You know what I'm saying? Good. So these are the 6 objectives that you really would like to know in a Mishnah. Okay. Now, the second thing you want to know is don't try to master everything at one shot. You know, what you need to do is what's called layer it. You need to layer the Mishnah, or layer the Masechet. You want to go through the entire Masechta, right? How? You want to understand Pshat. What does it say? See what I'm saying? Because ultimately what you want to do is get the entire picture of what's being said. You know what I'm saying?
And what is he saying?
Who?
And then what is he saying?
And then what is he saying? Yeah. What is it? What is said? What is he really saying? Which means, what's the meaning of it really? Because many times the meaning is not clear from the statement. You see, which we saw last time. But what I'm telling you now is when you learn it, right? You can learn a Mishnah, but if you really want to acquire information or database, which is, you know, then you're going to learn the entire Masechta. You're not going to learn one Masechta, you're not going to learn one idea. And you'll go through all the Mishnayos with a very strong eye on organizing it. So you'll have to go through the entire Masechta, and you'll see, and then you'll ask yourself, what is the central idea of the entire Masechta? You see? Because every Masechta has an entire idea in it, really, you know? And then you go back over again the first Mishnah, and then you go deeper and try to answer the rest of the stuff. It's like layers, 1, 2, you know? It's called readings. It's the first reading, just to get the ground rules. What is it saying, basically? Then you try to organize that. Then there's a second reading and a third reading. And after a while, you've mastered the entire area, subject. It was developing. It's tremendous. Yeah. So that's how you would learn if you really want to get serious about having success in Torah. That's what it's all about. You want to be successful, or you want to be like everybody else. Remember hardly anything. Good. Now, so we did Brachos, 2 Mishnahs. We're going to do now what? We're going to do Bava Kama, first Mishnah. Who wants to read the first Mishnah? Who?
Just open it.
Oh, you want to do it?
No, but yeah, no, I did it last time. Let me just open it for you. Where's the left Mishnah? Nezikin. There you go.
Okay, Rabbi was Nezikin, Ashor, Vahabor, Amave Vahever. Lahari Ashor, Lahari Ashor Kari Hamave, Lahari Amave Kari Ashor, Velo Zev Ozev, Sheish Ben Ruachaim, Kari Ha'esh, Shein Ben Ruachaim, Velo Zev Ozev, Darkan Leilech Hazik, Kari Habor, Shein Darkan Leilech Hazik, הצד השורש שבהם, שדרכן להזיק, ושמיר עושים עליך, so כשהזיק, now this is where it gets a bit sticky for me.
Chav Hamazik.
Chav Hamazik Yishalim Tashlumi Nezek B'Meitav Ha'oretz.
Hey, yes, great job. Now, what do?
We ask, what is the preliminary ideas?
Well, before the preliminary, we have to have some idea of the Mishnah, before we have preliminary ideas. But if everybody basically looked at the Mishnah, so what are some of the preliminary ideas?
Well, it's talking about 4 Nezikin. It's not this.
4 Mazikin.
4 Mazikin. The question is these are the total number of Mazikin? I mean, if you just take the Mishnah.
No, there's a preliminary idea before. What's a mazik?
Okay.
You need to define these things. Don't take it for granted. What is a mazik, really?
A person is dealing with the property belonging to the other in a way that is detrimental to that property. That means you have no rights over the property, and you are handling property which is not your own in a way that it is detrimental to the interests of the owner of the property.
Wow, that's an earful. A mazik is somebody who perpetrates a hezek. Brief. What is hezek?
Well, let me find it.
What is hezek?
Reduction in value.
Who? Reduction in value. Well, that certainly is a hezek. You know?
Was it? We said was
what is damage, really?
What?
I once said it.
Damage.
You know? Let them see if
Okay.
he knows. What is damage, really? You need to define your terms. Because if not, you're going to mean one thing and I'm going to mean another.
Degradation.
So we know what a mazik is, right? A mazik is a perpetrator of damage. Very simple. But the real thing is, of course, okay, you perpetrate damage. What in the world is damage, really?
Interfering with an object, causing depreciation, causing a lowering of the value of the object.
No. Sounds shocking, huh? What you're saying is true, but it's not the answer. Now that's puzzling, isn't it?
If I'm sitting on a chair, I'm swaying up and down, and the chair breaks, then I've caused, then I'm a mazik, and I've caused a depreciation of the value of the chair.
True. I didn't say it was false, but that is not a definition of hezek.
You're talking about intention, lack of
You are
intention?
giving me a case, and I don't want a case. I want a concept. What is damage really? Yeah,
Interfering with someone's violence.
yeah, that's because you heard it. Exactly.
Heard it where?
Here?
Yeah.
What is hezek? Hezek is to interfere with someone's ownership.
So that's what I was going to say.
It's a denial, an interference, a negation, an intrusion, anything you want to call it, right? It's an interference of bias. That's really what it is. Which means if nobody owned it, you wouldn't be a mazik, would you? If you go to a forest and you kill a deer, are you a mazik? No. Nobody owns the deer. I mean, you're a mazik, the deer will insist that you just damaged it. That's true. But who cares? The deer can't take you to Besdin. You know what I'm saying? You see what I'm saying? Yaakov?
Yep.
Simple.
Interfering with the rights of the owner.
Oh, no, interfering with ownership, period. Now, what is ownership? That's the next thing you need to define. You see? You get slow. So we know that if you interfere with ownership, you're a mazik. That's what a mazik is.
Yeah, but therefore, isn't it really that bias is the first of the preliminaries?
Yes, but we have to work our way from the Mishnah. You're right.
Oh, from
No, but
Mishnah,
remember, we're learning.
Fine.
Now, I don't necessarily know this first because I need to work my way. You said, what I'm doing, I'm working my way.
Right.
Yeah, you're right. In the sequence of ideas, if you're teaching it, so you would say, okay, what is the foundational concept of this Mishnah? What is the foundational concept? Now, everybody will tell you, well, it's hezek. No, it's bias. Because without bias, there's no such thing as hezek. So therefore, the fundamental idea is really bias. So we need a good definition of bias, which I've defined many times. What's bias?
That you have a right, or at least an interest, in the property. Now, there are different levels of rights. I mean, for example, if it's Baal Tashkas and it's your own stuff and you destroy it, the Almighty has also got a bias in the article.
True.
So it means someone who actually has an interest, at whatever particular level, in the property. I mean, for example, a house, right? I mean, a house owner may own the house, right? But somebody is collecting the ground rent. So if a
Too vague.
It means you are a stakeholder in the property. That's what it would mean. You have a stake in the property, or whatever it is.
You have control over it.
What stake?
You may have a right to walk through it.
What
You
do you
might
really have?
You may have.
Generalize it. Don't. A stake is a vague term. I need a clear, precise understanding of what bias is. Don't give me a case that illustrates it.
You
that I
have a
can walk
say
on my
in how the
property.
property can be used.
Oh, so therefore, what can I really do with the property?
You can do what you wish with it.
Okay, so I will use a word for that. The definition of bias is, it is a legal state. Because I want to say what type of an entity it is. Right? There are different
If it
types
were
of
not
entities.
legal, if it were not legal, then it's not bias.
No, it is bias. It's not
Why?
legal. What you mean, what's the concept of legality?
The whole.
I once said, what does it mean to be legal? What does it mean to be legal?
Meaning that.
What does it mean?
It's not. Bias is not just I have an object in my hand and therefore it's in my hand. I use it. Bias is saying I have an object in my hand that I have ownership of it.
Don't use the word
I
you're trying to
have.
define.
Yes.
The definition.
I have. Sorry.
That is a no-no.
I have legal. Okay. I have legal
Enforceable
rights.
rights.
That's it. Legality means I can enforce
Right. Yeah.
in a court of law
Yes.
or by the governments. That's what legal means.
But if I don't have that, then that's not called bias.
Fine, fine. So far we say what? That bias is a legal state in which an individual has rights of control. There you go.
And also responsibilities.
No, that emerges from bias. Don't mix up a consequence with the definition,
Let me ask you, the,
Yeah,
Right.
see?
right? So a bias simply is, it's a legal state, therefore it's enforceable. in which an individual has rights of control. That means he can do whatever he wants. I can eat it, I can throw it away, I can junk it, I can give it away, I can transfer ownership, I can destroy it, I can do anything I want with it. In other words, the law recognizes that you control this object, therefore we call you an owner. That's a problem. Now, if I walk over to you and I interfere with your bias, I'm a mazik. You see what I'm saying?
Let me ask
You were right, but look at the difference. You see, it's simple, it's clear. Now, how many different ways can I interfere with your ownership? So we're going to now look at the various types of hezek. You know what I'm saying? How many ways can I interfere with your ownership?
Let me ask you, the emotional damage doesn't say
Emotional?
emotional damage.
Emotional.
Like causing somebody a nervous breakdown. Let's say.
Okay, yeah.
You don't see this in the Mishnah.
You do?
No, well, that's a good question.
Yeah.
You do in a choivel.
Yeah.
If somebody walks over and punches you in the face.
Okay, that's a physical damage.
Yeah, I mean, no, there are other, wait.
It's Bolshevik also.
But
Yeah,
I'm talking
well,
physically.
Nezikin,
Okay, all right.
Ricochet,
So you have side things that happen from the physical damage. But I'm talking where a person causes psychological damage to somebody, not using physical force, maybe by doing things in the side.
I would think Boishis is
Yeah.
emotional.
Yeah, there's also...
Isn't Boishis emotional?
Yeah, I
Shame?
would say it is.
There you are.
Yeah.
So shame,
all
okay,
right.
then the question is, no, how do you measure shame? That's a different
No,
story.
I'm not talking.
But
I'm
shame is
talking about-
emotional. But I don't see,
But
Shame.
everything in the Mishnah has some physical action, right?
well, it's not physical, there has to be an
Some-
action.
An action of some type.
Of course, or else
Okay,
how in the
but
world
we're
do you
not-
do it?
or how about somebody doing something to somebody in an emotional way that causes that person to break down?
Fine, so that's called Boishis. That's a choivel. If somebody walks over to somebody and embarrasses them, you know what I'm saying? Although that Boishis is really part of the other four, theoretically.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? But that's a good question. It's a good question.
You can have a Boshus without anything else attached to it.
Yes, yeah, okay. So,
What
exactly, yeah. So, but anyway, again, let's try to be general first, So we know what a mazik is. We know what hezek is. We know what bias is, right? Okay, so how many ways can I interfere in your bias? And that will tell us the form of hezek. Because hezek has many interferences. So what's one? How many ways can I interfere?
With one's own body.
Who?
By using one's own body of damaging another person.
No. That's how many forms of mazik are there. I asked how many forms of hezek are there, in the sense of how many ways can I
Oh, okay.
interfere, right?
Okay.
How many ways can I interfere with your bias? So one, what's the first way?
Removing it,
Removing what?
the object its own,
How do you remove it?
take it away.
Oh, so what have I denied? You still have rights. I've not taken away your rights.
That's true.
So what have I denied?
Access.
Access.
Access, exactly. If I take away something, I've denied access or your ability to control.
Or your ability to use.
Or your ability, control includes usage and so on. Yeah.
Interfere with the access.
What's that
interfere with
called?
control.
What's that mazik called?
The neighbor.
A ganaf. That's what a ganaf is. Why is a ganaf and a ganaf and a mazik? Why? Because he interferes with your ability to use it, your access to it. That's one type of, you see? What's another way to interfere with your bias?
By causing a deficiency in the object itself.
Yeah, so how have I interfered?
You're damaging.
What?
Damaging.
No. Again, how have I damaged? Damage simply means that I've interfered.
Impairing my usage.
If my
Impairing
ox,
the person's usage.
if my ox kills your ox, how have I interfered with your bias?
Taking away
My what?
my
Total
my
access.
ability to use this thing.
I don't have my object anymore to control.
That's total loss.
So I've interfered with my ability to control by removing the object. You see what I'm saying? which is interesting. A Ganov doesn't interfere with your ability. He just he
removes
your access. But I didn't remove your rights. And you can still control it, but I don't have it. Here, I've destroyed the object. There's nothing around to control anymore.
That's right.
You know what I'm saying? Oh, you see, there's different ways. You see, either I can take it away, which means you no longer have the ability to control, although you have the same rights. Here, I've destroyed your rights. Why? Because there's no object anymore. So what rights? Rights to what? You know? Yeah, you could say, okay, you have a dead animal, so there's a limited way. Okay, but basically, what am I going to do with a dead ox? I can't even sell for kosher meat because your ox gored it, now it's straight. You know, so I can't even make steaks out of this. It's ridiculous.
Sell it to the gun.
Sell it to the gun. Don't make steaks, right? Okay, you see? So that's what basically we're dealing with. We're dealing with a Mishnah that wants to deal with what? Well, now we're going to the Mishnah. So you're just not, okay, so we've got preliminary ideas. We know that the fundamental concept of which the whole Nezikin is predicated on is bias. We know what hezek is. It's an interference of bias. We understand the different forms of hezek, correct? Right? And we understand what a mazik is. Now, great. Now along comes the Mishnah, and what's the Mishnah going to tell us? What's the Mishnah again? You want to do me a favor? You want to sit over there so I can...
Maybe slide.
Oh, I see.
So let's move a bit further up.
Well, you fell asleep and I didn't know it.
There you go. Problem solved.
Perfect posture.
Anybody who's out of the range of somebody teaching is suspect.
Say again,
Unless you've
please.
been relationship for many years.
What?
So
Yeah, no,
you grew up together.
I'm joking around with the guy, but
What did you say?
I said anybody who's out of my visual range is
A
suspect.
suspect. The usual suspect.
Yeah, those are the guys who want to have the option of falling asleep.
So you were beginning to ask me something.
Oh, yeah, no, okay, so look where we're at. We have the PI. We have the preliminary ideas now. We know bias is the foundational concept, right? Hezek is an interference in that. You know what I'm saying? We understand some of the forms of mazik, of hezek, and now we're into mazik, the purpose.
That would fit in with the
Who's the
idea of psychological damage, because we've got a concept of hezek re'ir.
Re'ir?
Re'ir.
What is hezek re'ir?
That means that you're not allowed to
that's
build, you're not allowed to, that when you build something, it must be in such a way that other people can't readily see what you're doing.
So what's the hezek? I'm not
It's-
doing anything to you. Hey, listen,
No, it's
you and
stopping.
I live
It's
together.
stopping.
You and I, we live in two different chutzes. I'm in my chutzah and you're in your chutzah, right? Okay. And but I have a window that's facing your courtyard, your yard, right?
Yes,
What's
but
the
knowing
hezek?
that I can watch everything that's going on interferes with your enjoyment of your property and your
Yes, right.
privacy.
Is what?
Knowing that I can see everything that's going on in your chutzah interferes with your enjoyment of your property. Which means
Your
that
enjoyment?
I have your enjoyment of your own property.
What is this, a psychological factor?
No, well,
Because if you enjoy that, that's...
the Mishnah seems to think it is. Because
No, the
it
Mishnah
tells you that
doesn't
you
think...
can't.
Wait, no. What? Usage. Enjoyment is a subjective term.
Mhm.
You know, there's a lot of people that are miserable with their property. You know? So I can say, excuse me, do you enjoy your property? And the guy says, no, I don't really enjoy it, so then what do you want from me? Wrong word.
Usage.
That's it.
I'm interfering with your usage.
That's it.
No, but-
I have a, notice why? Because I'm a bomb, right? And I have, therefore, what are my rights? I can control, I can use this. And when you look at me, I can't use this because, you know, I want privacy, you know? So that's the question. Is this damage? Is this enforceable? It is damage, but is this an enforceable damage?
Yes.
Well, that's the Gemara, that's the first mission of Baba Basra. Is hezek be a shmei hezek or not shmei hezek? Because the theoretical, I'm not really doing it. It's just that I can look, and so I'm a mazik by looking at you. What do you want from me? So is this enforceable? That I can force you to build a wall together with
Apparently
me?
it is.
I'm not saying no, don't get me wrong, right? I'm just saying this is the concept here. This is the fundamental problem in that Mishnah. So obviously the Mishnah says, yes, You say, but what's the basis of that? The basis is that I'm a mazik. Why am I mazik? Because I can prevent your usage. How do I prevent your usage? By observation or by seeing. You see? So, okay, who cares? So that's what the Mishnah deals with. You see what I'm saying? Okay. So getting back to our Mishnah, so now the Mishnah is going to tell us all about mazik. Yes?
Not all of them.
Yeah.
I know what Mishnah.
Eliezer, you're on.
Okay.
First couple of statements. Let's begin to think. Go ahead.
Okay, so we're starting on the Mishnah.
Yes, now we're in. Because we have enough ideas to get into it.
Yeah. Arba Avos Nezikin. There are 4 main categories.
Stop. Oh, okay, no. Give me the 4.
Shor.
Ox.
That is,
Well, that's what means ox. It means ox.
Yeah. Shor, Bor, the
The
pit.
pit.
Maveh, which is the machlokus, what that means.
Okay, but let's take something. Let's say it's a shame. The teeth.
Okay. The heather, fire.
Heather is fire. Great. So what is the Talmud telling me?
But I'm not, maybe I'm jumping the gun, but all 4
Yeah.
is not that Odom, it's Lichora, according to one opinion.
Yeah.
You're not, if you say that Maveh is shame,
Yeah.
then all 4 of them is not the person himself directly doing damage, but they are things that belong to somebody who's doing the damage.
It's possessions.
Possessions do the damage, according to this, and I think it's Shmor. So, Shor is somebody's bull, maybe goring or something like that. It's not the man himself goring.
Yes.
Habor is a pit. Again,
So
somebody digs a pit.
So you've mentioned an important idea. Give me its structure. I mean, say something about it.
In other words,
This.
there
Tell me.
what the Mishnah is already introducing
Yes.
is the idea that in order to commit nezek, to commit the offence of nezek, it doesn't require just that the person himself directly, like with his own body, to damage, but he uses but there's another agent.
So therefore the Mishnah informs you based on this, what?
That one can be equally chayav.
No, forget chayv. That there are 2 types of mazikim.
2 types of mazik.
You can be a direct mazik or an indirect mazik. There you are. It's the concept that you don't have to do a hezek directly, you can do it indirectly. How? Right? So the Mishnah points out by your possessions.
Right.
You didn't do it, what do you want from me? It's my possession that's the concept of an indirect mazik. That's an important idea. That's number 1. Because you would think that I didn't do it, so what do you want from me?
This is all built on one Havrim in the Gemara, because according to another...
Fine. Those ideas simply means what's included in the term.
Okay.
That's all it means, So we'll just pick one, you know what I'm saying? So we picked Shor is ox, Bor is pit, Maveh is teeth, and Hever is fire.
Right.
Let's work that way, okay?
Okay.
And so, but what you point out is correct, that it indicates something.
Yeah.
And what does it indicate?
The indirect...
There's a concept of
indirect mazik.
mazik, direct mazik, and indirect. That's very important.
And that they're equal.
That you don't have to do the hezek to be obligated. That's the concept of an indirect mazik.
Yeah.
Look, we're deriving ideas. You see? So this is what the Mishnah is saying.
Yeah.
Even though it didn't, the Mishnah said 4, but what it's saying is that there are 2 types of mazikim.
Yes.
Direct or indirect. Number 1. Okay.
And that the indirect mazikim can be divided up into 4 categories.
Yes.
And the category of Shor...
Yeah, which we went through now.
Right.
What do we think about here?
And
What's there to think about here? There's something wrong with this statement. I shouldn't say wrong, but there's something that screams at us.
well, we know that there are many, many more mazikim than 4.
Then why does it say 4?
There's something about these 4 that are unique.
Oh! What is it?
They all come from the same part of the Torah. The same subject,
No.
very close to each
That,
other.
no, I wouldn't make it.
Or that they are all issues of your possessions, causing either direct damage or indirect damage, or they involve an escape going from your rishus to somebody else's rishus.
But there's something else. Why
Yes,
are these
yeah,
unique?
escape.
Why are these unique?
They
They're
all
all
pay
prone.
100% of the damage.
You could go out against all these 4. They're not something you do deliberately, you could guard against all these four types of
But
situations.
no, that would be unique about, that would be true of all mazik. You've got to guard against them.
They are all prone.
What did you say, Larry?
I said that all of them require 100% payment for the damage.
Is that, oh, these four?
These four.
Are you sure?
Yes.
Okay,
No.
so,
These are four
No.
categories. These are four
Excuse me.
categories.
No.
now,
Regular is potten of shusarabim, so
Yeah,
is shame.
So,
That's not 100%
Excuse me.
we're
damage.
talking about damaging something in.
But every
somebody's
mazik
property.
requires,
I
wait a minute, every mazik requires
No,
100%.
Excuse me.
a tam and a muad and goring are two different.
Fine, but basically, if you're a mazik, you gotta pay.
okay,
It happens to be, we'll get into time and wood. So, but what do you mean? You always have to pay, basically. A tam is an exception, right?
Yes.
But what do we have? You have shor, bo, mav, and hever, right?
yes.
I don't see Karen in here, do you?
Or-
You don't have
No,
to.
because it doesn't discuss goring at all.
No, but why are there four? Every mazik is
Yes,
Four
100%.
categories, main categories.
So therefore, it should say, Ovas Nezikin.
Yeah.
Why Arba Ovas Nezikin?
Okay, excuse me,
What-
can I
Go ahead,
suggest
sure, of course.
that these four,
You had
by
a
nature-
kasha?
yeah,
What's this four business?
yeah, these four are uniquely prone, much more prone to damage, Daukon Hazik, than other forms, than other things. In other words, there's certain things like Shveisbus. I'm just trying to think of something. Maybe I shouldn't even try to think, but there are certain things that you don't expect it, that you don't, yes, let me explain.
Yes.
If you put a shore is known sometimes to gore. It has
Yes.
a tendency to be aggressive.
Yes.
A butterfly, right? That would be a good example. It's
Oh,
not
really?
prone by its nature, or a little pigeon. It's not by its nature prone to attack anybody. So if somebody has a butterfly, and that butterfly
But I don't
attacks,
understand, there are many things that are prone to do damage.
yeah, are they
So
all-
why are there only four?
because these are overall categories. For example, a pit, right? I mean, that would come to cover putting a chair or something in a shusarabim in a way that could cause people to trip over. That's under the general category of bor. In other words, those arba ovos nezikin represent, they cover. Each one covers a whole range of different things, but they are broad categories that cover those things, those items that are significantly prone enough to cause damage that we have to take reasonable steps to protect the public from being damaged by them.
I want to tell you something. Any mazik is prone, basically.
Yeah, but
I would never say four. There are millions of different types of mazik. I would never say there are four.
these are the others.
Categories.
These are
Even
broad
if they're
categories.
categories.
These are broad categories. For example, if I may say,
It's not just a shore, it's the shore represents a category of damage that this
Or
falls.
it could
there's many things that fall under for sure. Can I explain?
I'll give you a mazik that's not there.
Okay.
How's that? I have a pet tiger in my house.
A pit what?
Tiger.
That's more.
And that's
Not
not
sure.
natural. That's
That
an
would be
unnatural
unnatural.
use of land, and that's another type of disease.
That's discussed in the Mishnah.
What type of a mazik is a
Sure.
tiger?
Sure.
It's not a shore.
It's not
It
a
look
shore.
like an
It's
ox.
under category of shore.
No,
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 it's not.
no,
It's
it's
completely
not
different
true.
category.
Exactly, it's another mazik. What is it? It's not a shore.
It's
Not
not
a
a shore.
bore.
It's under the
Not a
shore.
mab
does-
or hever. What is
excuse me, a shore
Well, if you
in the
trip over
Mishnah
it, then it
does
is-
not mean shore in the Mishnah does not mean bull. It's a
Doesn't
it's
mean
a
what?
name. Shore in the Mishnah
Ox, yeah.
does not mean ox. It does mean ox literally, but it's
So what does it mean?
it's a category
Of what?
of aggressive, of animals that are prone to be aggressive, such as now.
What is shore in the Mishnah? What is it? Give me the
It's a
example.
machlokas of what it means, but let's say one
If it means regular, is regular aggressive?
Well, it depends how you want to see it, because according to
Regular is not
according to
aggressive.
because
An animal is walking in the Rishus around, right? An animal doesn't walk, couldn't care less. And all of a sudden steps on your kalim. I don't see any aggression there.
well, it says shalosh avos nemru b'shor, which implies
Forget Karen. Look at regal, because shore really is regal, basically. Okay. I don't see regal as aggressive.
no, the regal isn't aggressive, but I mean it's.
Look,
We're taking on a
it's
particular
bothersome.
element of the
You
Gemara.
mean to tell me of the entire world, there's only 4 categories? That's incredible. I just think about that. How could you categorize anything in the world that can damage as one of these four? That's an astounding statement.
The interesting thing, Gemara does ask that, and it adds an extra 2.
What is?
It adds an extra 2 because Karen is included in expressions later on in the Mishnah.
Okay.
So there's 6 of them actually.
You understand the problem here? You don't tell me every mazik in the world is included in these four. Of course not.
You have to finish
So
it.
why would the Mishnah say, give me a number?
So you have the general principle of the Av, and then you have the Toda.
No, it should have just said Ovus Nezikin, not Arbo Ovus Nezikin. My question isn't on Ovus. Yeah, they're categories, no problem.
We can count.
But why are there four?
Because it wants to also emphasize the responsibility side. Darka shmiro sonolecho and darkon the hazik. Now, there are plenty of other types of damages which are categorized, but they don't fall into the category
Sure
of...
they do. Any mazik is dark in the hazik, shmor sonolech, you chayv the tashmi nezik. Why these four? These four the only ones? Any way to do
No,
damage.
but you're not required on the same scale. I mean, for example, Hezekah here wouldn't be assessed the same way as Shor.
Well, we don't know if it's a damage or not. It's a different issue.
Or take the example of the
But if
tiger.
we establish something as a mazik, right? So why are there only four?
Well, take the example of the tiger. It doesn't fit into the normal rules.
The who?
Tiger. The example of the
Yeah,
tiger.
so
It
my
doesn't, because you're not
tiger,
supposed to
I
have one in the
forgot-
first place.
Okay, so I have a tiger, right? And I forgot to feed it dinner. There it goes. Right? And all of a sudden I have a guest knocks at the house. And not only did I forget to feed it dinner, I forgot to put it back in its cage. And guess what? It's roaming my house. Now me and the tiger get along perfectly, no problem. But that's what you mean, the tiger. Guy walks in, and guess what? He's dinner. What kind of mazik was that? I hate to be so gory.
Instead of,
It wasn't fast.
instead
brings
of
home
having
cold.
the main course, he is the main course.
What?
It's not for sure.
This is a guy. Well, what? Tell me what type of damage this guy was.
It's a living
Substantial.
thing causing damage.
He's known to be a danger. This animal is known to be a danger.
Yes.
It's like the shore was already gored. You know, it's been warned. His owner was warned.
Just
In
push
a
it.
sense.
What is the uniqueness of regel? What is the characteristic? Let's take a look
It's
at each one of
it's
these.
a live thing.
It's certainly alive, regel,
Right.
basically, right? But what is uniqueness? What characterizes?
Something living.
It can move
No,
from place to
we
place.
have you
It
have
moves on its own accord.
Shane is teeth. I assume you guys know the
Can you just
mission.
get the document that I had past them before?
Oh, okay.
I don't told him that.
Animation, non-animation.
What is the uniqueness? Each one has a uniqueness. What is it? What is the uniqueness of regel?
Well, it's inadvertent damage by an animal.
Exactly. That's called derech hinucha. Hezekah derech hinucha. It doesn't even look at the object. It's not interested in the object. The object is incidental. You know, in fact, how did the ox destroy the object? Because it wanted to destroy the object? No. Then how? In what way did the object destroy the regel, the ox walking, destroy the object? What's the thrust of the characteristic?
Unintentional. It was in the course
Of what?
of moving along, in the course of
That's-
its
So
regular
in
behavior.
in the course of
It's
its
normal
regular
activity.
existence, this got in the way. It doesn't even know it. You know, you see these huge, you know, they step on something, they don't even know they stepped on something. They're so humongous, you know, and so on and so on. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And meanwhile, they just stepped on somebody's Da Vinci vase. You know what I'm saying?
And
It was
also,
about $1.5 million. You know, the ox looked at it. What do you want from me? You know?
and also, the whole thing is...
Or except on a Ming Dynasty vase, you know, it's like one of a kind, right? No, so therefore, so that's the unique characteristic of that mazik. That mazik has absolutely no intent to damage. It's not even focused on the object. What's it doing? It is living. You see, and in the course of its living or striving or existing, that's damage.
Yeah.
That's its characteristics. What do we care?
What do you mean, what do we care?
Why do we care about its characteristic? Well, let's take another one. Shame. What's the characteristic of shame?
Well, that's where the animal, it's basically destroyed through an animal's appetite, through consumption. consumption.
So what's the unique characteristic there?
It's not even consumption. It can roll around. I think if it rolls around and stretches.
Yeah, okay. So therefore, what are we talking about here?
Fulfilling, well, in the course of fulfilling its desires, its natural desires,
Yeah.
it destroys, it
Oh,
damages.
so it fulfills its needs, whatever that is. You get its back scratched, rub against the wall, and the wall topples, right? Or eating. In other words, it wants to use the object to fulfill its need, whatever it is. But it's focused on the object, but not focused on damage.
On the damage, right.
So the animal is thinking about the object already, and it's specifically using the object to do what? To fulfill some type of a need.
It's also within
That's
Rishus
the
HaYochid.
characteristic. What?
Also within Rishus HaYochid.
That's a condition.
Ah, okay.
Because it's just Rami Potter, right? Okay. Then we have what? So we have shore, which is regal, shane, right? And then we have bore, pit. What's the unique characteristic of bore or pit?
It's an obstacle. It's an obstacle in the way. It's a stationary obstacle.
It is stationary. That's true.
Although you can have a rolling bore.
Yes.
But it's an obstacle in the way. In other words, you're not talking about intent. You're not talking about fulfilling a need. And it could be something inanimate.
Yeah.
And it's something that causes a person to trip in the course of his walking. In other words,
Yes, but again, you're using a case.
Hazard. It's a hazard.
It's a hazard. You don't say a guy trips. That's a case. You can't. It is from its inception. It's a hazard. Yeah, that's what it means. Tchilas asiyos Nezikin. When it was created, it was a hazard.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? Okay. And what about fire?
Well, it's moving. That's a form of
Not live.
self-propelled.
Doesn't
No, it's
wind propelled. Yeah. That's what.
It's a wind-propelled
Mazik.
mazik.
So it needs a koyach acher.
Yeah.
Right? It doesn't move based on its own energy and so on. It needs the assistance of something else.
Today you need a fifth form.
Who?
Today you need a fifth form, which is a self-prepared moving like a rocket, which is not ruach acher, the thing intrinsically.
Fire.
Okay. So we now understand what are the unique characteristics of each mazik, right?
Yes.
So my question to you is, so what? So what?
They master the state of mind.
No. Yeah, question, because you notice that.
So every form of mazik will share one of these attributes.
Well, who cares? Why are we so fixated on a characteristic of a mazik?
Different halachas.
What?
Different halachas.
Say that again.
Different halachas.
So maybe that's why there are only 4. Maybe the Mishnah says there are only 4 mazikim that deviate from the real concept of mazik. What's the real legal consequence of mazik? You're chayev 100% all the time.
Except in this case.
Except these types of mazikim are not chayev all the time. They clearly deviate from the concept. What?
Oh, just a minute. Only Karen deviates from Kessin Nezikin.
No.
Or maybe Kessin Nezikin.
Shane and Regal is potter Mishus Rabin. Bor is potter by Kedem. Or right? And Eish is potter by Toman. If it's concealed, I'm saying. Wow. It's what's called a deviant mazik. And there are only 4 types. That's why. So that answers the question. Of course there are millions of mazikim. But there are only 4 that deviate from the standard mazik. You see. That's what you want. So how do we arrive at this? Because you asked the kasha 4? Why only 4? And that's what the Mishnah says. There are 4 mazikim that deviate from the standard payment schedule of a mazik. They're potter in some given circumstance. What determines their patur? Their unique characteristic. This is the problem.
It's interesting the Mishnah doesn't mention that, does it? It says it's had a shalosh abahem,
Wait. Now, so the Mishnah says there are 4 mazikim, and not only are mazikim, they're really categories. Therefore, if it tells you it's a category, what is it really saying?
There are many more. There are many mazikim that can't fall under these 4 categories.
That's the consequence.
So it
of
fits
what
in
it's
in the
saying.
structure.
If I call something a category, what am I really saying?
It's a clown.
That's the translation.
I know.
What am I saying?
You're saying
If I say, hey, this is a category, what am I really saying?
that there's a structure.
No.
No, the one.
No, that's a category.
You're saying that it's a subsystem within a system, in that each of Nezikin has it's a subsystem, and each one has has got specific rules and regulations.
Almost, but not all there. Almost, but they're not there yet. What am I saying if something is a category? What you're saying is true. That if it's a category, that means there's a subsystem or sub-members, what you want to call it. Fine. But what am I really saying?
There's a relationship. A category is...
What is the relationship?
Within that category, there has to be a relationship with the items in that category.
What is the relationship? What does it mean to say something is a category? What's kind of
Yeah, they're all governed by the same rules and regulations.
What does that mean? What are the rules and regulations? Yeah, okay, that's true. Yeah, that's true.
So regular, for example.
Why?
Okay, regular.
Why are they all? What makes this a category? Or what? When I say category, what am I really saying? And therefore, there's a subset, and they're all governed. Why? What's the principle of a category?
The principle of a category is that...
What makes it a category? Not what makes it, but when I call something a category, what am I really saying?
It's also...
A Malach and Shabbos, yeah? A Malach and Shabbos, Zoreh,
It's
right?
also different than the other.
Wait, so let's say Malach and Shabbos, of Malachas. In Shabbos, where else do you find Ovas? Right? Let's say Shabbos, right? Zoreh, I plant. So I say, well, planting is a category. So I include a lot of stuff under that. I can water the garden, that's also Zoreh. How? And not how, but, so therefore when I call something that's a category, what am I really saying that therefore demands, a subset, and demands that the laws of the subset are identical, uniform? What am I saying?
Share a common characteristic. Share a common characteristic.
Keep going. You're almost there. You know, when I say something, when I say Kokai, you know what I'm really saying? I'm saying that what makes this a mazik isn't a specific case. It is a principle in the case that determines its ability to machayev you. And therefore, any other case that will have this specific or principle is included as a member of this category. See, what a category does is it takes it out. Don't look at this case. You see, look at what's in the case, and that's the determinant for the chiyuv. Therefore, any other case that will have that determinant or that principle is also chayav. That's what it does. In other words, it tells me, don't look at this specific case.
Look at its character.
Look at the principle in the case, which in this case happens to be its character trait, and that determines the chiyuv, not the case. It's the principle. Therefore, any other case that has the same principle will also be chayav, identical. See that?
But that would be a Torah, wouldn't it?
Exactly. That's called a Torah.
That's the distinction between an Av and a Torah.
What is it between an Av and a Torah, really?
Same thing. I mean, except that the Av is the case from where the principle is derived, and all some cases that have those characteristics.
That's
are
it.
Torahs.
The Av is the teacher, the illustrator of the principle.
So
it's not unique in itself. It is only unique that I will show you what the problem here is. You see?
The illustrator.
Exact. And therefore, if it's an illustrator, anything that illustrates that principle, bam, is chayav. In other words, it removes the shift from itself as an individual case and says, don't look at me as a case, as an individual. Look at me as an illustrator of a principle. That's the determinant for chiyuv, and therefore anything that has that principle is chayiv just like me. That's what it means to be an Ov. You see what I'm saying? And therefore, when you have an Ov, it becomes a what? It's a category, and the Ov is only a member of the category. But it's an important member because it illustrates the principle. That's why it's called an Ov. But it has no other uniqueness than any of that's told us. It's just that it is the case that the Torah used to illustrate the principle. That's what an Ov is.
And an example
Now we
of
gotta
that
find
are
out,
these-
so what's the principle? See, if this is an Ov, what must we do? What's the principle? You see, once the Torah said, well, this is not just a mazik, this is a mazik category. So all of a sudden I need to do what? I got to find out what the principle is. Because it's not the case that's unique, it's the principle that is the determinant. You see? So therefore I got to find out the principle. And not only is the principle that defines the category, but it also creates the deviation. You see?
What does that mean, creates the deviation?
It makes it different than regular mazik.
Yes.
You see? So we now realize an incredible idea, that there are two fundamental classes of mazik. What are they? There's mazik that doesn't deviate from tashlumim, and there's mazik that do deviate.
What's an example of one which doesn't deviate?
My tiger. My tiger, that's why I brought it. My tiger is a classic mazik. It's always chayav.
It's Brachos and Nezikin.
No, tiger, anywhere it's chayav.
When you're home, you can't
It's in my own premise.
That's a different...
If you have something like a tag,
If you let a tiger go loose in the street,
So that's a different...
Isn't that the only case
That Brachos mazik is a general exclusion of all mazik. I'm talking about it's only an exclusion on these four. No, because mazik has exclusions general, but that's not what this Mishnah is. This Mishnah is saying that these four mazikim, right, have conditions where they're potter, whereas all the other mazikim are chayav. Hey, that's not fair. But the question is, what makes them potter? What is the determining principle? So, take a look.
Yes.
If something strives naturally, and in the course of living, it damages, yes? So where is it potter? In Rosh Hashanah.
Kessin as extruders.
No, forget that. No, that's different, because that's called the
Shane
Nezikin
is
direct.
Shane is completely potter.
It's who?
Shane is potter.
Yes, also. Why? Shane is potter Rosh Hashanah. That's right.
Because there's no bias on something that's left in Rosh Hashanah.
No.
If you've left something in Rosh Hashanah and made it hefka, there's no bias.
What do you mean no bias? Of course there is.
It's hefka. It's hefka.
It's not hefka, it's your animal. What are you talking about? You own it. What are you doing? Your animal just stepped on my Da Vinci vase.
Shouldn't be put in the shus.
Well, yeah, what are you looking at to begin with? You know animals come.
Because you don't have that right on the Rosh Hashanah to put your Da Vinci vase there.
Why?
Because the Rosh
Be a
Hashanah
bore.
gives Rosh
Right,
to me
it's
as
a
well
bore.
as Rosh to you. That's the meaning of Rosh Hashanah.
Exactly. It's public.
Our right.
So the
to say.
Torah said, listen, this is public usage. And so it's one thing, so if it's public usage, I have a right to use it as you. Oh, fine, okay. So therefore, if it's public, if the damage is done in a way which is striving, how can a Nezikin protect himself? He can't. Because this was done in the context of an animal's normal living. So I can't protect myself. You ever go to India, they're walking with their water buffaloes in the middle of the street. So then the question is, who is obligated to watch? Who? Is the mazik obligated to watch his animal in a Rosh Hashanah? Or it's not realistic. The Torah said, I cannot impose on the mazik to watch. Therefore the one who has to watch is the Nezikin. So therefore the mazik is potter.
But that's in the case of regel.
Yeah, and Shane.
But not to Karen.
That's different. Hold off Karen and
That's a different set of rules.
That's a different set.
But the case that the
Let's go
Mishnah
slow.
gives is the case of regal, is the case of regal and possibly Shane.
Well, Shor would be regal, and Mav would be Shane.
Now the Mishnah, I'm talking about Mishnah Haminiach Zakab Rishus Rabbi, which is
Yeah.
ways up the right
Yeah.
between
Yeah.
the Nazik, the Nizik and the Mazik.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
who's up bought? Balachov is Chayav Beniska.
The Baal HaChovos is Chayav Benitzkoi. Yeah, okay.
Right, which shows that there is that the Chazal are very careful when they weigh up the rights of the mazik and the mizrach.
Exactly.
When damage is caused in a place where both of them have equal rights over.
Yes, so therefore, but what's the determinant on who's chayav? Really? What's the determining principle of who's chayav?
Rights, the right to each one.
What right?
The rights
What
to
is
God,
the
which is
fundamental determining principle on who is chayav?
Who's the one that should be having shlita over their object?
Almost. No. That's a second
Shmirasa.
principle. Who?
No, the
What did you
Shmirasa
say?
Alecha.
Yeah, it is Shmira. Who's obligated Shmira? That's it. The one who's going to be chayav is who's obligated to watch it. So that, right? Now, normally, who's the natural person that's obligated?
Owner.
Who?
The owner.
The owner. Because why? Why does the owner, the guy, have to watch it?
Responsible.
So
Why is he responsible?
because he's the one that has shlita.
Because what?
Because he's,
Why is the owner responsible? What do you want from me? You want something? Pay. Talk to my animal. Make him pay you.
Because he's the one that has control.
Control. There you go. Yeah. If you have the legal right of control, then you need to watch it. I can't watch your animal. I don't have control over this. If I did watch it, I'd be a ganav or gazlan. So the whole thing starts from Bailis. And therefore Bailis dictates what? Well, Bailis allows control. And control demands shmira. And shmira is the principle for chiyuv. You see how it goes one after the other?
Good, Rabbi?
You see?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's linked to the question I was, if you could back up and talk about the deviation.
Yeah.
That stems from the interruption of ownership, right? Yeah, I mean, why these four Abos Nezikin, why these Abos Nezikin are deviations from the general rule.
Of what?
Of what, exactly? That's
No,
what I'm
of
having trouble.
payment. Of payment. They deviate from the normal payment.
Well, what?
Because
where
they
do
are
you-
potter in certain
So where do you learn?
circumstances.
Where do we know those?
From the Torah. That we know that from the Torah. Uvia b'stei acher. Each one of these exemptions is a posel. Uvia b'stei acher, and he will, consume in another's field, but not in the Rishus Harabim. Each one of these things have a limudim.
So these are deviations from what
Yeah,
you would
deviations
learn.
from the normal payment of a mazik. So weird when the Mishnah says Abba Nezikin, what it's really saying? There are four categories of special mazik, which means that there are two types of mazikim.
But there's really only one category where there's no deviation at all.
Yes.
And that's only
Tiger.
Adam Mazik.
No, there's also tiger.
Oh yeah, but an Adam
There's
is
no
kind
way that
in
tiger-
in every reshus, in every form.
So is a
A
tiger.
tiger is in every reshus.
Yeah. You let him go wild on the street.
Again, if he's in my reshus,
No, if you
I'm
let-
the bottom of this object,
No, if
of
you
this
let-
tiger,
if I let
and
that-
someone comes into my
Wait a minute,
reshus,
tell me when a tiger is
I'm
potter.
potter.
How? No, that's all mazikim are potter. But let's say I'm walking with a tiger in Rishus Harabim.
But Adam is not butter if he's mazik someone even in his own reshus.
In his own Rishus?
Yeah.
What do you mean? If you walk into my house,
Someone walk.
are you sure?
I walk into your house, and
In the middle of the night?
Chasvikul, you come and you damage me or my object. You're not chayiv.
Yeah, because you're not allowed to do that even if he's in your house. Well, that
that is the base.
the tiger.
So the guy comes to the door with a shotgun and blows it before he opens the door
So
and kills
therefore,
the
that's a
tiger.
matter of, are you trespassing?
Yeah, see, that's-
Are you trespassing or not? What are you doing here? I told you to get out.
Yeah, but if you invite him in, and you
Yeah,
got
it's-
a tiger running around.
Trespass
Yeah,
is-
okay.
Trespass is necessary.
All I'm saying is this, look, there's a lot of different variations. All I'm saying is that fundamentally, there are two types of mazik. One is the special mazik, which is the Mishnah. That's what it's really saying. And there's what's called general mazik, or standard mazik, where there are no exemptions. And if there's an exemption by that, that exemption would carry on all mazikim. That's okay. You know, every mazik has some times when they're potter, but it's potter not because of its unique characteristic. It's potter because of the class. This is not hezek, or it's not hezek which is responsible, or shmira. You can distinguish between the
So,
two.
in other words, it's sort
But
of...
these mazikim are potter because of the unique characteristics in them. Not because of general mazik. No, there are special deviational. You see what I'm saying? This is what the Mishnah is saying. That there are 4 categories of mazik that deviate from tashlumim, not because of the exemptions of a general mazik, because they in and of themselves, in terms of the characteristics, potter them. Wow, it's a different Mishnah.
Yeah.
Everybody knows that Mishnah. There are 4 classes of mazik. Yeah, okay. No, there are not. You see? But there are not. There are only 4 classes of special mazik. That the characteristics in and of themselves will exempt them or deviate.
So could one arrange the information like this? That the main category is Odom. The main category, if you like, the main definer of Hezek, or the main category, is Odom, because Odom would La'olam. Just like a person.
No. The main category is no. What is a mazik? Give me the definition of a mazik.
Somebody who is capable, we're talking about a force which actually interferes with the rights of somebody adversely, so something that interferes adversely with the rights of the other.
Great.
Okay, that's a mazik.
Not really.
No, have I lost it?
You left one incredible ingredient out.
Adversely affects.
Oh, well, no. Let me ask you something. What is Karen? What exactly is Karen? Tell me. Is Karen a mazik?
Yeah.
What do you think? It certainly looks that way. What is Karen? Tell me exactly. What is Karen, really? We know the case. You have an animal, and all of a sudden he gores. He sees another ox.
He's normally docile.
What?
He's normally docile.
What are you saying?
He's changed his character.
So therefore what? So what?
So is it here to Shameh?
No,
It's not normal.
How does that change?
It wasn't predictable.
Exactly. What does predictability do?
What
What does it create?
Right.
Wait, no, there's something in between. If I know something is predictable, yes? So therefore, what does that establish, really?
Obligation.
Responsibility.
Why?
Because if it's likely that something was going to happen, then you have to be responsible to prevent it in advance. You have to take necessary precautions.
What does likely mean? What does likely mean?
It's
Therefore what?
It's relating to me as Bailing, to my knowledge of its damaging.
What does it mean to be likely? So much. What's likely? So
Predictable.
okay. There's an expectancy that this animal will do damage. Or an expectancy. So therefore, what's the definition of mazik? 1. It's an object that can do damage, and it will do damage. Therefore, you need to watch it. Where do you find this definition? Where do you find it? Where? Isn't that in the Mishnah?
So in other words, it belongs to the main. The exceptions belong. This is what brings it together with the.
But it's more than that. What the Mishnah is doing is defining general mazik. That's what I mean. That what? That it's not lahazik, it's dark lahazik. That's the concept of expectancy. And therefore, shmur sonalecha. Right? So therefore, what's a Karen? What is Karen really? All of a sudden I have this nice docile animal. Really nice, My kids play with it. You know what I'm saying? I play with it. It's fabulous.
What? Who? Because
it's not there.
For that reason,
so
that the Torah says that it's only as a result of previous behaviors that it can be established as
it's only from previous that it can be what? And therefore, if it's established, it is expected.
Although there's
now, let me ask you something. I got a goat. I got an ox. I got an ox, right? I have an ox, right? And you know, I'm walking along with Shusara, yes, and all of a sudden the ox takes. Somebody's walking with a pole. He's got a. He just bought a $500 Barney suit. But I think a Barney's costs more than that.
I think you're talking.
And I walk along, and all of a sudden this ox, he's behind me, right? It was just around, right? The ox sees his clothing. He says, "Wow, I'm hungry," and he starts munching on my suit. What's the mazik?
Shame.
What type of a mazik is it?
No, it'd be Karen. It's not shame.
Karen! Oh, wait a minute, but the ox is enjoying the food.
Yeah.
He's anole zeko?
No, because that's a shemur.
No, so what's the problem here?
Because
It's mishune.
Yeah.
What does mishune mean? It's
Not
expected. So Karen isn't a mazik. It's the concept of unexpectedness in any mazik.
That's interesting. That means if I have a
You hear what I just said?
Yes, excuse me.
Karen, people make a mistake. They think, well, Karen means you're an animal god. No, that is an illustration of an unexpected mazik, and therefore it is chatzinezek.
Excuse me.
So therefore, anything unexpected is Karen. Therefore, Karen is not a mazik. It's not a stink. It's not a case which have a specific characteristic. It is the concept of unexpectedness in any mazik that will make it chayav chatzinezek.
Excuse me, but surely there's a difference between a bull.
Did you say surely?
Surely.
I heard that.
There's a difference between a shore that is tam, that's never done any damage,
Yes.
is unexpected,
Unexpected.
and a butterfly,
Yeah.
that suddenly, I keep him in an aquarium,
Yeah.
and then one day, this little nothing butterfly smashes through the glass,
What is-
and then starts breaking down somebody's house.
Great. So what have you just
The difference.
sounds like a very angry butterfly.
It's a Japanese movie.
The difference between the two is that we know it.
It must be some type of a rare African butterfly. It's what's called it's a whole species of aggressive bees.
Yes.
They go bananas. It's a new form of butterfly.
So in other words, I would say that there's a difference. There's a big difference between a docile bull and a butterfly.
Yes.
Because a
What's
docile
the
bull has
difference?
the potential.
So what's
of
the
becoming-
difference?
The difference.
Tell me
is-
the difference.
The in practical terms, a docile bull has the potential through its nature to become.
Summarize it into a principle. Give me the principle. You're giving me the case.
Okay.
Remember, don't stick with a case. Generalize it into a principle.
Predictability.
What's the difference between the butterfly?
Potential.
What's the difference
Totally
between
unpredictable.
the butterfly and the ox?
Totally unpredictable.
Who?
Totally unpredictable.
True, but
No.
give me the principle.
It is a
Darfan.
natural.
What?
It is a natural attribute of the animal to do this.
Yes.
Not
Give me
The
expected.
capacity.
but,
Give me,
um,
say it, claw. You're right, but I need, say it.
It all has to do with Ushmiros on Alecho.
That's the product, that's the consequence. But
Darfan.
what is it? What is the difference in principle between a butterfly and an ox?
Butterfly doesn't have a horn.
No, but that's the point.
You have not seen some butterflies.
I'm
No, a
naive.
butterfly has no ability, no potential ability to do
So
any damage.
therefore, what
that's
is
not
the
true.
principle?
No, not in terms of aggressive.
Yeah,
We're talking
no,
about
it's
aggressive
not.
behavior.
Capability.
Of course, it can do damage
It
in
can
some
do
nature.
damage.
We're talking about
You guys,
aggressive behavior specifically.
Now, I think the principle is that the thing is that there are three categories of Nezikin. Those who it is their nature to always cause damage, and they're utterly predictable. Next level is it is not their usual nature to cause damage, but
It could
they
happen.
might. It could happen.
Yes.
That's where Tamamur come in. And then you have the third category where there's no way that the thing could have been forecast.
It could never be anticipated.
Could never be.
So what have you described? 3 examples of,
Responsibility.
that's the consequence.
Of damaging forces.
Of expectation.
I mean,
Oh,
expectation.
there are degrees of expectancy.
Yeah.
That's what it is. There are degrees of there are some animals which are, hey, my tiger is expected totally to do damage. Then there's a less degree of expectancy, right? Which is called infrequent. And that is a domesticated animal.
It's where Tamamur coming.
Yes. So what is a tamu? A tamu is nothing more a statement about a degree of expectancy in this animal. You see, so in animals which are, so a tiger is frequent, because that's its nature. An ox which is domestic is infrequent. And a butterfly is rare.
So what's the
It's
halacha?
impossible.
Wait.
What's the halacha of
Therefore, what's the
butterfly?
difference between these three? The difference is to what degree of expectancy is there. That's what Karen is. If it's rare, you are potter, you're an onus. If it's frequent, you are chayev, because shmir selecha. But if it's infrequent, you go either way. It's chatzi nezik.
Yeah.
And there's a machlekes. Why you chayev chatzi nezik? So one guy says, it's a machlekes in the Gemara. Really, you should be chayev nezik sholim, because even in frequency needs a shmira. But the Torah was chos. Or the other guy said, really, you should be potter. But watch it, but since there's a statistical probability,
Yes.
even if low, that it could, you should have watched. So you can go either way. That's true. But
Could I ask you a
wait 1 second. But the main thing is the measure of the category is the degree of expectancy. That's it. And that's what a tam and muad is. A tam reflects the degree of expectancy. That's what I mean. To be a tam means no expectancy or poor, and expectancy means yes. So therefore, the Torah said, listen, okay, it's chatzi nezik, but so the question is, so when does this animal become expected? 3 times.
The Torah
The
says
Torah is
three
giving
times.
you a rule
Yeah.
that if it does it 3 times, now it becomes a muad, which is general mazik. It enters the class of general mazik. There's no more hepaturia, because you see, so it comes out that Karen is not a mazik. It is nothing more than a degree of expectancy which is infrequent. And therefore the Torah deals with that halachically. You see? Which people make a mistake. Oh, Karen is a mazik, and they tell you, what's the mazik? Kavanas lahazik, but it's not the Torah uses an ox that has as an illustrator of expectancy degrees.
The Gemara said Kavanah.
Yeah, because that's the illustrator. That's the illustrator of the concept of Talmud. Kavanus of a hazik by a domestic animal is infrequent. We're not talking about an animal in the forest. You're talking about a domestic animal that works around human beings or works around other oxen. You see, why should we think? We're not talking about a wild animal that the only thing it looks at is how to eat and kill. A domestic animal socializes with other oxen. In fact, some of its best friends are other oxen. And it's got a girlfriend that's an ox. Or a bull. No, the bull is the male. Yeah. It's cow. Yeah. So, and I'm like, what'd you kill your cow for? It's your girlfriend. What are you doing?
When I ask you,
That's why it's infrequent. It's not expected. It socializes with these
But if
things.
he's a muad to Gor, it doesn't change his status as to other things that he's not a muad to.
No, only to Gori. And so even when it establishes its credibility or its bona fides, as they say, as a muad, it's only in whatever it expressed it. Because in everything else, it's still unexpected. You see? It says, look at what the Mishnah is, a different Mishnah. The Mishnah above Nezikin is what? There are 4 special mazikim that deviate from the normal standard of tashlumim. 1, how do we identify them? Through their principles, not their cases. And it is the principles themselves that cause the deviation. Sometimes, although Aish is hard to understand. Why is it if the thing is concealed? You fought, burnt the guy's house down. Who cares if all the furniture was concealed? Whatever, there's Gzer Sakosov also. But the key is we need to identify that mazik that has a deviation from normal hezek. See? So that's what the Mishnah says. Now, we're into Loy Harei. Now we really understand the first 4 mazikim. Now the next thing the Mishnah says is Loy Harei Zekar Zeh. You want to ask something?
yeah, something is totally unexpected. Sometimes a butterfly.
Yeah.
What happens after 3 times? I'm trying to
Get out of that town.
No,
You became a larva.
we're talking about,
That
we
only counts
after
in the
3 times,
Then
there is,
that
there
isn't,
is, there
that's,
is
larva
a
stage.
possibility.
that's a more.
So it becomes a mode?
He's
Sure.
unborn.
Because it is proven
So it's not,
that
it falls into the category of the second one, then,
of more, not Tom.
a mode.
Yeah.
No, so I'm saying then it's really 2 categories.
Which
One
is,
that is always like a tiger,
yeah, or
one that it's not, we don't know, not expected.
it's unexpected,
Yeah,
and the other one is
but
called rare.
But above point, nobody would expect.
That's
at all.
right, that's what's in honors.
So after 3 times, it becomes what?
A more.
It does become a mode?
Sure, because that 3-time behavior establishes a pattern. And once it establishes a pattern,
Right, and
it
then I have
establishes
another
an
question.
expectancy.
Why do you have Rahmanas on the Mazik? Why don't you have Rahmanas on the Nizik?
Well, the mazik has to pay the nizik.
Yeah, but the Nizik took a loss.
Yeah, so you have to pay him.
Yeah, good. So why, you said the Torah had Rahmanas because that's why it's...
Oh, you mean by Tom?
By Tom. So that's why he only pays half, because he has
Yeah.
Rahmanas.
Yeah.
Why don't you have Rahmanas on the Nizik?
Because you have to remember, in the end, what determines
He
Really?
did damage, he cost him
what?
$100 damage, he only gets 50.
But
So he
there has
takes
to
a
be,
loss of 50.
okay, but there has to be some type of negligence. You have to have violated your shmirah. And if the Torah doesn't give you shmirah, you're potter. What do you want from me? I'm not mechuyev to war. The whole thing hinges on shmirah.
But in the bottom line...
Without shmirah, you're
yeah,
potter.
but in the bottom line, the Nizik takes a $50 loss.
Yes, but if I'm not obligated to watch it, the Torah says you're not obligated. What do you want from me? I'm not obligated to watch it, so therefore I'm potter. It's true, you're right. The guy has a loss, you're right. But in order to obligate somebody to pay, he has to be responsible. And if he is not obligated to watch it, the Torah removed from him the responsibility of Shmirah, and therefore, which is in it, you actually bring up a very interesting concept. If I have no obligation whatsoever to watch it, is there any case where I'm still held responsible? Because, not that I'm held responsible, and by the way, there is. If your ox ate somebody else's food, and therefore you don't have to pay, you don't have to give dinner to your ox, because now just got
You've gotten the
filled
benefit.
You
with
have
somebody
to
else's
reimburse
food.
for the...
You've gotten the benefit.
That's hano.
Right.
That's because you benefited,
Right.
not because you were mazik.
Right, okay.
There's 2 different ways of going here. You benefit from it. Hey, come on, you benefited, so you're obligated to pay. But you have to pay because you benefited, not because
That's
you
not damage.
violated your shmirah. 2 different directions here. You know what I'm saying?
I was always thinking about also the case.
I want to get the loy harei. Yeah. The next loy harei zeh karei zeh. Right? They have a whole bunch of these loy hareis. Right? Who cares? What's this an academic? What?
Because we're asking...
Why is the Mishnah saying that the characteristics of, let's say, Shor and Maveh, which have Ruach HaChaim, is not like a ball, let's say, that doesn't have Ruach HaChaim, or whatever, right? Or an Eish, whatever,
Right.
right? So what?
It's delineating why it is that you need to list 4 categories and not less.
So, what, you mean in the Mishnah?
Yeah, the Mishnah is clarifying as to why it is
No.
we need 4 categories. Because in other words,
Torah.
why can't we get away in the Torah? Why can't we just have 1 or 2 or 3 categories? It's explaining that you need all 4
Where?
categories.
Where would those categories be written? Where? Where?
In the Torah
In
itself.
the Mishnah?
It's a
In the
good
Torah
question.
itself. So therefore, what is the issue here?
It's explaining...
What is the issue?
Derivation.
Derivation. If the Torah had written Shor, you could not derive the others because they are exceptions. So therefore the Torah had to write all of them. That's what the Torah said, it's not possible, the derivation of any of these mazikim that are special mazik cannot be derived. You see? And therefore the Torah has to write all of them. So the Mishnah is saying, why can't they be derived? Because each one has a unique characteristic that we would say, well, this kind, Ruach Chaim, is what does it. You see what I'm
Well,
saying?
it's interesting that it doesn't explain, when it comes to Ruach Chaim, why you need both of those. When it comes to the Derek Kolel Kol Hazik, and what's the other one? the bor, she'ein darko leila kol
Yeah.
hazik, and ruach chaim in general,
Yeah.
then you know why. Oh, that's got life, so that's different. But within the category of sheish baruch chaim, the Mishnah doesn't give any indication as to why does you need both of them. You understand? It says, you know,
No,
Because they're
it
sharing
says that
any
they have a
common,
characteristics that is enough
characteristic.
for me to exclude anything else.
no, but what I'm trying to say is that why can't you just have shor and not matter? And why can't you have matter and shor? That the Mishnah explicitly does not explain.
Doesn't say, yeah. It only goes when both of them together. That's
Yeah.
right, yeah. So, therefore, here's the classic illustration. What is being said and what is the Mishnah saying? You see, this is classic. What is being said? That the characteristics of these are not like the characteristics of that. That's what it says, right? But what's the man saying? The Tana is saying, therefore, I'm saying that you cannot derive one from the other. You see, but the Mishnah doesn't say that. That's why it's a classic why you need to understand what does it say besides what is being said. Then the Mishnah comes along with Tzara Shavish Behem. What's it doing there?
Should really be at the beginning. That's how it should open.
What?
That's how it should open.
It should open that way.
But the
Why?
way that-
What is that?
The reason
What
is
is the Mishnah doing when it says Atzar Shavish Behem, Shadak Lahazik, Ushmor Salecho? What is it saying?
What it's taking is it's taking it from the Torah level to the Mishnah level. Because it starts off with the cases in the Torah. Arba, Obas, Nezikin.
Yeah.
Ashur, Amava,
Yeah, okay.
Heva, and so on.
Yeah.
Then it says why the Torah needs to tell you
All four.
all those four. Then it says what is the context of which those things are, which is within the general rule of
What's a
of
general? So what is it really doing? When it
Darka
says-
lahasiku shmiros samalecha.
What is that?
That is saying, that places the context of saying that the cases in the Torah are the exceptions, but it is running against the background of general Nezikin, which is Darka lahasiku shmiros samalecha.
What is that called?
Principle.
The principle. The general principle.
It's called the definition.
The definition.
That's what it is. The Tzara Shem, don't think just because they're exceptions that they don't form the definition of mazik. They do. That's what it says. The general tzad, the general commonality is they fall within the purview of mazik. And because they all conform to the definition, which is they do damage, and it's dark mazik. It's what it's expected, and therefore ushmiros alecha. The Mishnah is providing you a definition, and then the Mishnah goes into the last area. What? And when they do damage, what's the Mishnah saying?
You're chayav complete.
Yeah. So there you are. There are four different things the Mishnah is saying: division, derivation, definition, and disbursement. Four these.
Sorry, I'm just
Disbursement.
I need to take this down.
Payment.
1 sec.
How did you disperse your funds? 4 Ds.
Four
Division,
Ds. Yeah.
division, 4.
Division.
Derivation, that you can't derive one from the other. These are the ideas, right? Definition, what is the general definition of mazik? And disbursement, payment. 4 Ds.
Division. Did you say
Derivation.
Derivation.
Definition, and disbursement. So this mission is all about what? Everything you want to know about a mazik, we're afraid to ask. That's what this mission is about. It deals with four
Definition and disbursement.
because it's not, the central idea is what? It's really 4 ideas. It's all about mazik. What are the special cases?